When a 48-year-old CEO was told she was too old for love in a crowded cafe, she sat there in silence until a stranger stood up and changed everything. What happened next shattered every assumption about age, worth, and second chances. This is a story about a powerful woman who'd built an empire but couldn't escape judgment, and a single father who'd almost forgotten what courage felt like. By the end of this journey, you'll see why love doesn't follow anyone's timeline. Stay with me until the final moment, and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Hit that like button, and let's begin. The evening rain had started as a whisper against the windows of Harbor Street Cafe, but by the time Eleanor Whitmore pushed through the heavy glass door, it had become a steady drumbeat, insistent, relentless, refusing to be ignored, much like the thoughts that had been hammering at her mind for the past 3 months. Every head turned. They always did. But tonight, for the first time in 15 years, Eleanor Whitmore didn't walk into a room like she owned it. She walked in like someone who'd just discovered that all the things she'd built, the corner office on the 42nd floor, the portfolio worth 9 figures, the reputation that made competitors nervous and investors eager, couldn't shield her from the simple, devastating truth that she was lonely. She chose a table in the corner, not out of strategy but out of instinct. A place where she could face the wall, where she could pretend for just an hour that she wasn't the woman whose face appeared in Forbes and Fortune, whose decisions affected thousands of employees, whose quarterly earnings calls moved markets. Tonight, she just wanted to be invisible. The cafe smelled like roasted coffee beans and rain-soaked wool. Soft jazz played from speakers tucked somewhere in the exposed brick walls. Around her, people talked and laughed. Couples leaning close over shared desserts, students hunched over laptops, an elderly man reading a paperback with careful attention. Normal people, living normal lives. Eleanor wrapped her hands around the ceramic mug the waitress had brought, some herbal tea she hadn't really wanted but ordered anyway because sitting alone without something to hold felt too exposed. The warmth seeped into her palms, but it didn't reach the cold that had settled somewhere deep in her chest. She'd turned 48 last month. The board had sent flowers. Her assistant had organized a tasteful lunch. 300 people had wished her happy birthday on LinkedIn. She'd spent the evening alone in her penthouse, looking out over the city lights and wondering when exactly she'd traded everything else for success. The answer, of course, was that there hadn't been a single moment. It had been 1,000 small choices, each one seeming reasonable at the time. Work through the weekend to close the deal. Skip the wedding to manage the crisis. Let another relationship end because the other person just didn't understand the demands of her position. She told herself it was temporary, that once she'd built something stable, once she'd proven herself, once she'd reached whatever invisible milestone she'd set, then she'd make time for everything else. But the milestones kept moving, and the years kept passing. And now she was sitting alone in a cafe on a Wednesday night, trying not to think about the profile her well-meaning sister had set up for her on some dating app she'd deleted after 3 days. The messages had been educational, half of them from men who saw CEO and immediately pitched business ideas or asked for investment advice. A quarter from people young enough to be her children, using phrases like, "Age is just a number," and "I've always been attracted to mature women," as if 50 wasn't mature, as if 60 wasn't mature, as if she was supposed to be flattered by their willingness to overlook her expiration date. The rest were just sad. Men her own age, listing their gym routines and income brackets like defensive shields against the terror of irrelevance. Eleanor had deleted the app and told her sister to never try that again. "You're just too picky," Sarah had said, in that gentle tone that made everything worse. "You're looking for perfect. Perfect doesn't exist." Eleanor hadn't argued. There was no point explaining that she wasn't looking for perfect. She was looking for real. For someone who saw her, not her title, not her bank account, not her age as either an obstacle or a fetish, just her. She was starting to think that person didn't exist. The door opened again, bringing another gust of rain-scented air. Eleanor didn't look up. She focused on her tea, on the grain of the wooden table, on anything that would keep her inside her own private bubble of isolation. She didn't see him walk in. Marcus Chen was everything Eleanor usually avoided. Expensive suit, confident stride, the kind of smile that had been practiced in mirrors. He was maybe 40, maybe younger, with that peculiar arrogance that came from having been told he was exceptional since childhood and never encountering evidence to the contrary. He'd been at a networking event downtown, the kind Eleanor usually attended but had skipped tonight because she couldn't face another room full of people who wanted things from her. Marcus had left early, bored by the predictable conversations, and decided to grab a coffee before heading home. He spotted Eleanor immediately. Recognition flashed across his face. Not the warm recognition of a friend, but the calculating recognition of opportunity. He knew who she was. Everyone in the tech sector knew who Eleanor Whitmore was. He walked toward her table with the easy confidence of someone who'd never been rejected for anything that mattered. "Eleanor Whitmore," he said, his voice carrying across the quiet cafe. Several heads turned. "I thought that was you." Eleanor looked up, her professional mask sliding into place automatically. She didn't recognize him, but that meant nothing. She met hundreds of people every month. "I'm sorry," she said politely. "Have we met?" "Marcus Chen. We were both at the Innovation Summit last year. I run Chen Digital. We're doing fascinating work in AI-driven marketing analytics." Of course he was. Everyone was doing fascinating work in AI-driven something. "It's nice to see you again," Eleanor said, in the tone that usually ended conversations. Marcus didn't take the hint. Or perhaps he did, and simply didn't care. He pulled out the chair across from her without asking and sat down. "Do you mind?" he asked after he was already seated. Eleanor did mind, but years of professional courtesy warred with her desire to tell him to leave. The courtesy won, barely. "I'm actually just having a quiet evening," she said carefully. "I completely understand. I won't stay long." He leaned back, getting comfortable. "I just wanted to say I've been following Whitmore Technology's trajectory for years. What you've built is genuinely impressive." The compliment felt hollow, transactional. Eleanor had heard it 1,000 times, in 1,000 variations, and it always preceded an ask. "Thank you," she said. "Especially impressive," Marcus continued, "given how challenging it must be to maintain relevance in such a rapidly evolving sector." There it was, the subtle dig buried in the compliment. Eleanor's fingers tightened slightly on her mug. "Innovation requires adaptation. We've been adapting successfully for 15 years. Of course, of course." Marcus waved his hand dismissively. "Though I have to say, I think there's something to be said for the energy younger leadership brings to tech companies. The willingness to take risks, to disrupt old models." "Experience teaches you which risks are worth taking," Eleanor replied, her voice cooling, "and which ones are just reckless." "Sure, sure." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I just think, and please take this in the spirit of friendly advice, that you might want to think about succession planning. Not immediately, of course, but the market does tend to favor younger executives, especially for companies trying to appeal to Gen Z consumers." Eleanor set down her mug with deliberate care. "My company's Q4 earnings were up 32%. Our customer satisfaction ratings are at an all-time high. Perhaps the market favors competence over age." "Hey, I'm on your side here." Marcus held up his hands in mock surrender. "I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. This is a young person's industry. You've had an incredible run, but maybe it's time to think about stepping back, mentoring the next generation rather than trying to compete with them." "I'm 48, not 80. "Exactly." Marcus leaned forward, his voice dropping to something he probably thought was confidential and caring. "You're 48. Look, I'm going to be honest because I respect you too much to blow smoke. You're at an age where you need to start thinking strategically about your legacy, not just your quarterly numbers." Eleanor felt something crack inside her chest. Not break, she was stronger than that, but crack. A hairline fracture in the armor she'd spent decades building. "My legacy is the company I built from nothing," she said quietly. "Of course it is. And that's wonderful. But there's more to life than work, right? Family, relationships. Those things matter too." "I'm aware." Marcus glanced at her left hand at the absence of rings. "Are you seeing anyone?" The question landed like a slap. "That's none of your business. I'm not trying to offend you. I'm trying to help." He sat back, studying her with an expression that might have been pity. "Here's the thing, Eleanor. You're 48 years old. You're accomplished, you're intelligent, you're financially secure. Those are all great qualities. But in the dating market, they're not enough. Men, successful men, men with options, they don't choose women your age. That's just reality. The cafe seemed to go silent, or maybe Eleanor just stopped hearing anything except the rushing sound of blood in her ears. They choose younger, Marcus continued, oblivious to or uncaring about the impact of his words. Women in their 30s, early 40s at most. Women who still have time to have families, who haven't already committed all their energy to their careers. It's not fair, maybe, but it's true. Eleanor couldn't speak. She stared at him, this man she didn't know, who'd sat down uninvited and decided to explain to her why she was unlovable. I'm not saying you can't find someone, Marcus added quickly. I'm just saying you need to adjust your expectations. Maybe look for someone recently divorced or widowed, someone who's already had their family and isn't looking for that anymore. Someone who's just looking for companionship in their later years. Later years. She was 48. I should go, Marcus said, standing up. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card, placing it on the table between them. If you ever want to talk about strategic partnerships, or if Chen Digital can help with anything, give me a call. And Eleanor, for what it's worth, you should consider taking some time off. Travel. Relax, you've earned it. But trying to compete with 25-year-olds in the boardroom or the dating scene, it's just going to lead to disappointment. He walked away. Eleanor sat frozen, staring at the business card he'd left behind like a small paper grenade. The jazz music continued. The couple at the next table laughed about something. The rain kept falling. And Eleanor Whitmore, who commanded boardrooms and closed billion-dollar deals, who'd built an empire through sheer force of will and intelligence, felt something she hadn't felt in decades. She felt small. The words circled in her head like vultures. Men with options don't choose women your age. Not, I prefer younger women, or I'm not interested. But a declaration of universal truth. A pronouncement on her market value as a human being. She was 48, and according to Marcus Chen, that meant she was past her expiration date. Eleanor picked up her tea, but her hands were shaking too hard to drink. She set it down again and pressed her palms flat against the table, willing them to be steady. This wasn't the first time someone had said something like this. There had been comments at conferences, conversations overheard at industry events, articles about women in leadership that somehow always mentioned age in ways they never did for men. But it had never been this direct, this cruel, this absolute. And the worst part, the part that made her throat tight and her eyes burn, was that a small, terrible voice in her head whispered that he might be right. She'd built a company. She'd created jobs. She'd innovated. She'd succeeded by every metric that was supposed to matter. But she'd also spent 15 years alone. 15 years of empty apartments and quiet weekends and nights like this, sitting in cafes trying to remember what it felt like to be chosen by someone, to matter to someone in a way that had nothing to do with her net worth or her influence. Maybe she had waited too long. Maybe she had made the wrong choices. Maybe, across the cafe, at a table she hadn't noticed before, Daniel Hayes closed his laptop. He'd been trying to work on a security audit report for the past hour, but his concentration was shot. His mind kept drifting to the conversation he'd had with his daughter Lily earlier that evening, right before bed. Do you think you'll ever get married again, Daddy? The question had come out of nowhere, sandwiched between a complaint about math homework and a reminder that she needed new soccer cleats. I don't know, sweetheart, he'd said honestly. Maybe someday. Katie's mom is getting married again. She says Katie's going to have a stepdad soon. Daniel had heard the uncertainty in her voice. Lily loved stability, routine, the predictable rhythm of their life together. Breakfast at 7, school drop-off at 8:15, dinner at 6:30, bedtime stories at 8. Are you worried about that? He'd asked gently. Lily had thought about it, her face scrunched up in concentration. I don't know. Katie says it'll be weird at first, but then it'll be okay. She says her mom seems happy. Happy is good. Are you happy, Daddy? The question had caught him off guard. Of course I am. I have you. But are you happy like Katie's mom is happy? Like grown-up happy? Daniel hadn't known how to answer that. He loved his daughter more than anything in the world. She was his center, his purpose, his reason for getting up every morning. But was he happy? He was content. He was stable. He was functional, but happy in the way Lily meant, that bright, full-hearted happiness that came from feeling connected to another adult, from sharing your life with someone who chose you? No, he wasn't. He'd tried after the divorce. He'd gone on dates that his sister set up, had joined a dating app that he'd checked maybe 3 times before the notification anxiety made him delete it. He'd met a few women, nice women, interesting women, but every conversation had felt like a job interview he was destined to fail. Single father, joint custody, limited free time. Emotional baggage from a marriage that had ended not with drama, but with the slow, sad realization that 2 people who'd loved each other had somehow become strangers. Most women weren't interested, the ones who were usually had complicated situations of their own, and the thought of blending all those complications together felt exhausting. So Daniel had stopped trying. He told himself it was enough to be a good father, a reliable employee, a decent person. He'd convinced himself that romantic love was a luxury, not a necessity, but Lily's question had cracked something open in him. A loneliness he'd been very carefully not examining. And now, sitting in this cafe at 9:30 on a Wednesday night, ostensibly working but actually just avoiding an empty house, he'd heard everything Marcus Chen had said to the woman at the corner table. Daniel hadn't meant to eavesdrop. The cafe was small, Marcus's voice had carried. And once Daniel realized what was happening, he couldn't stop listening, couldn't stop watching the woman's face as she absorbed each casual cruelty. He knew that face, that careful blankness that was really a shield against pain. He'd worn it himself when his ex-wife's new boyfriend had picked up Lily for a custody exchange and casually said, "Must be tough, man. Single dad, not much time for yourself. Hard to meet anyone new." As if Daniel's value as a person was measured by his success in the dating market. As if being a father was a liability instead of the most important thing he'd ever done. He'd worn it when his own mother had suggested, with devastating kindness, that maybe he should aim for someone more realistic, because women want someone who can give them more than a nice guy with a ready-made family. He'd worn it every time someone's eyes glazed over at a party when he mentioned he had a daughter, every time a promising conversation ended when the woman did the math and realized that his life came with complications. So when Marcus Chen stood up and walked away, leaving that woman sitting alone with her shaking hands and her carefully maintained composure, Daniel made a decision. He'd spent 3 years choosing comfort over courage, 3 years avoiding rejection by avoiding connection, 3 years telling himself it was enough to be safe. But watching this stranger absorb the same casual cruelty he'd experienced, seeing her fight to hold herself together in a public space, knowing that when she went home tonight she'd replay every word and hate herself a little more, something shifted in him. Maybe it was Lily's question still echoing in his head. Maybe it was exhaustion with his own loneliness. Maybe it was just the recognition that doing nothing was its own kind of failure. Daniel closed his laptop and stood up. His heart was pounding, his palms were sweating. Every instinct screamed at him to sit back down, to mind his own business, to be sensible. He ignored them all. He walked across the cafe, weaving between tables, his footsteps loud in his own ears. The woman didn't look up. She was staring at the business card on the table like it was a verdict she couldn't appeal. Daniel stopped at her table, hesitated, almost turned back. Then he spoke. "Excuse me," he said quietly. Eleanor's head snapped up, her professional mask already sliding back into place. Her eyes were dry but red-rimmed. Her jaw was set. Daniel saw all of it, the pain, the pride, the fragile armor. "I'm sorry to interrupt," he continued. "I couldn't help overhearing some of that conversation, and I just wanted to say—" He paused, searching for the right words. "Cruelty isn't honesty. That man was wrong, and you didn't deserve that." Eleanor stared at him. This stranger with kind eyes and an expression that held no agenda, no calculation, just simple human decency. "Thank you," she managed. Her voice was steadier than she felt. Daniel knew he should walk away now. He'd said his piece, he'd done the decent thing, but he didn't walk away. "Would you mind if I sat down for a moment?" he asked. Eleanor should have said no. Every lesson she'd learned about maintaining professional boundaries, about keeping strangers at a distance, about protecting herself, said no. But she was so tired of being strong and alone, so tired of walls. "Please," she said, gesturing to the chair Marcus had abandoned. Daniel sat down. Up close, Eleanor could see that he was probably in his early 40s, with brown hair starting to gray at the temples, and the kind of face that suggested reliability rather than excitement. He wore a button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up and no tie, and there was a small dinosaur sticker on the corner of his laptop that seemed wildly out of place. "I'm Daniel," he said. "Eleanor." "I know. I mean..." He looked embarrassed. "I recognized you. I work in tech security. Whitmore Technologies is kind of legendary." "Great. Another networking opportunity." Eleanor felt her walls slam back up. Daniel must have seen it because he quickly added, "I'm not here to pitch you anything. I promise. I heard what he said, and I know what that feels like. Different versions of it, maybe, but the same basic message, that you're somehow less valuable because of your circumstances. And I wanted you to know that someone else in this cafe thought he was completely full of shit." Eleanor blinked. Then, impossibly, she felt the corner of her mouth twitch. "Full of shit," she repeated. "Completely," Daniel confirmed. Aggressively. Almost impressively. The laugh that escaped her was small and sharp and surprised. "That's one way to put it. I heard him tell you that you're too old for successful men to be interested in. Does he think successful men stop existing after 48? Does he think intelligence and accomplishment have an expiration date? Does he think..." Daniel stopped himself. "Sorry, I'm ranting." "Please rant," Eleanor said. She meant it. Daniel took a breath. "I'm a single father. My daughter's 8. I've been divorced for 3 years. And I cannot tell you how many times I've heard variations of women don't want a guy with baggage, or you're past the age where you can start fresh. As if my daughter is a burden, as if choosing to be present in her life makes me less worthy of connection." Eleanor's expression softened. "That's terrible." "So is telling a brilliant CEO that she's past her prime at 48, Daniel countered. "We live in a world that's desperate to write people off, to put us in boxes labeled expired the moment we don't fit some narrow definition of marketable. It's exhausting, and it's wrong." They sat in silence for a moment. The cafe continued around them, conversations, laughter, the hiss of the espresso machine, but in their small corner, something fragile and true was taking shape. "Your daughter," Eleanor said finally. "What's her name?" "Lily." "Is she the reason for the dinosaur sticker?" Daniel glanced at his laptop and smiled, a real smile, warm and unguarded. "Yeah, she's obsessed with paleontology this month. Last month it was marine biology. Before that it was ancient Egypt. She collects information like some kids collect trading cards." "She sounds wonderful." "She is." Daniel's voice filled with unmistakable pride. "She's smart and curious and kind, and she thinks I'm an okay dad, which is honestly the only review that matters." Eleanor thought about the emptiness of her penthouse, about quarterly earnings reports and board meetings and the empire she'd built, about achievements that impressed everyone except the person who mattered most, herself. "I don't have children," she said quietly. "I kept telling myself there'd be time, that once I'd established the company, once things were more stable, I'd think about family, but the company always needed something. And now..." She trailed off. "Now you're 48, and someone told you it's too late." "Yes." "It's not," Daniel said firmly. "Life doesn't end at 48. Love doesn't end at 48. Possibility doesn't end at 48. "How do you know?" The question came out more vulnerable than Eleanor intended. Daniel was quiet for a moment. "I don't," he admitted, "not for certain. But I know that I'd rather live like it's true than live like it's not. Because the alternative, accepting that the best parts of life are behind me, that I'm just running out the clock until Lily grows up and doesn't need me anymore, that's unbearable." Eleanor felt something loosen in her chest, some knot she'd been carrying for months, maybe years. "I deleted my dating app profile after 3 days," she confessed. "The messages were disheartening." "I lasted 2 weeks before I deleted mine," Daniel said. "I told myself it was because I was too busy. But really, it was because every interaction felt like evidence that I was exactly what everyone said. Too complicated, too ordinary, too much work." "You don't seem ordinary," Eleanor said. "Neither do you," Daniel replied. They looked at each other across the small table. Two people who'd been told in different ways that they were too much or not enough, too old or too burdened, past their prime or past their chance. And in that moment, they chose to believe something different. I should probably let you get back to your evening, Daniel said, but he didn't move to stand. I should probably go home, Eleanor agreed. She didn't reach for her coat. Or, Daniel said carefully, we could order fresh coffee and keep talking, if you'd like. Eleanor should have said no. She had an early meeting. She had emails to answer. She had 100 responsibilities waiting for her. But sitting across from this steady man with tired eyes and quiet strength, she realized she didn't want to walk back out into the rain alone. Didn't want to return to her penthouse and replay Marcus Chen's words until they'd carved themselves into her bones. She wanted just for one evening to talk to someone who saw her. I'd like that, she said. Daniel smiled. He caught the waitress's attention and ordered 2 coffees and a slice of chocolate cake to share. And for the next 2 hours, Eleanor Whitmore and Daniel Hayes talked. They talked about Lily's school projects and Eleanor's first product launch, about the loneliness of leadership and the loneliness of single parenthood, about movies they'd loved and books they'd meant to read, and the strange experience of being in your 40s and feeling simultaneously too young to give up and too old to start over. Eleanor learned that Daniel had been married at 24 to his college girlfriend, that they'd been happy until they weren't, that the divorce had been achingly civil. No drama, no betrayal, just 2 people who'd grown into different shapes and couldn't fit together anymore. Daniel learned that Eleanor had started Whitmore Technologies in her spare bedroom with a maxed-out credit card and an idea everyone said wouldn't work. That she'd been told no by 73 investors before someone finally said yes. That she'd sacrificed relationships, friendships, sleep, and peace of mind to build something that mattered. Do you regret it? Daniel asked. Eleanor considered the question seriously. I regret the things I didn't make time for. The people I let drift away because I was always too busy. The moments I missed because I was in another meeting, another city, another crisis. But the work itself? No. I'm proud of what I built. You should be. What about you? Do you regret your marriage? Daniel shook his head. I regret that it ended. I regret the pain it caused, especially for Lily. But I don't regret loving someone, even if it didn't last. And I got Lily out of it, which makes everything worth it. The cafe began to empty around them. Couples left, students packed up their laptops. The elderly man with the paperback closed his book and shuffled toward the door. Eleanor glanced at her watch and was shocked to see it was nearly midnight. I've kept you, she said apologetically. I kept myself, Daniel corrected, and I'm not sorry about it. They stood together, gathering their belongings. Daniel walked Eleanor to the door, both of them stepping out into the rain that had softened to a gentle mist. Thank you, Eleanor said, for everything, for sitting down, for talking, for reminding me that not everyone thinks like Marcus Chen. Thank you for letting me, Daniel replied. He hesitated, then pulled out his phone. Would it be too forward to ask for your number? Not for business, he added quickly. Just to talk. If you'd want to. Eleanor should have said no. She was his CEO. Technically, if he worked in security at a tech company, there was a chance he'd worked with Whitmore Technologies at some point. There were professional boundaries to consider, power dynamics to navigate. But she was tired of should. I'd like that, she said. They exchanged numbers. Their fingers brushed as Daniel handed back her phone, and Eleanor felt a small electric shock of possibility. Good night, Eleanor, Daniel said. Good night, Daniel. They walked in opposite directions, each carrying something they hadn't had when they'd walked into the cafe hours earlier. Hope. Eleanor didn't sleep that night. She lay in her king-sized bed, staring at the ceiling of her penthouse as the city lights painted shifting patterns across the walls. Her phone sat on the nightstand, Daniel's number saved under his name with no title, no company affiliation, just Daniel Hayes. It had been years since she'd added someone to her contacts without a professional designation. Years since a conversation had left her feeling this unsettled and alive at the same time. At 3 a.m, she gave up on sleep and moved to her home office. But instead of opening her laptop to review the quarterly projections waiting in her inbox, she found herself replaying every moment of the evening. The way Daniel had looked at her, Not at her resume, not at her achievements, but at her. The steady certainty in his voice when he'd said that cruelty wasn't honesty. The terrifying possibility that maybe, just maybe, Marcus Chen had been wrong about everything. Across the city, in a modest two-bedroom house in a neighborhood where people knew their neighbors' names, Daniel stood in Lily's doorway watching his daughter sleep. She was sprawled across her twin bed, one arm flung over her stuffed triceratops, her hair a dark tangle across her pillow. She'd been asleep when he got home, and he'd been grateful. He needed time to process what had happened at the cafe before facing her inevitable questions about where he'd been, because something had happened, something that felt fragile and important and terrifying. He'd given his phone number to Eleanor Whitmore. The Eleanor Whitmore. And she'd given him hers. Daniel moved quietly to the kitchen and made himself tea he didn't want, just to have something to do with his hands. He kept picking up his phone, opening his messages, staring at Eleanor's number, then putting it down again. What was he supposed to say? Thanks for the conversation sounded inadequate. I can't stop thinking about you sounded insane. They'd talked for 2 hours, not embarked on some epic romance. But the truth was, he couldn't stop thinking about her. Not about Eleanor Whitmore, CEO. About Eleanor, who'd admitted she regretted the things she hadn't made time for. Who'd laughed at his rant about Marcus Chen's aggressive wrongness. Who'd looked genuinely interested when he talked about Lily's dinosaur phase, asking follow-up questions like she actually cared about his daughter's fascination with the Cretaceous period. At 4:30 in the morning, his phone buzzed. Daniel nearly dropped it. His heart hammered as he opened the message. It was from Eleanor. I know it's late, early, and you're probably asleep. I just wanted to say thank you again for tonight. I've been sitting alone for hours trying to remember the last time a conversation made me feel human instead of like a collection of quarterly earnings. I can't remember, so thank you for that. No need to respond at this hour. E. Daniel read it 3 times. The words were careful, measured, but underneath them he heard the same vulnerability he'd seen in her face at the cafe. He typed back immediately. I'm awake too. Couldn't sleep. Keep thinking about what you said about sacrificing moments for meetings. I've been doing the opposite, sacrificing possibilities for safety. Not sure which is worse. Both leave you alone at 4 in the morning, apparently. D. The 3 dots appeared almost instantly. She was typing. Is there a third option? One where we don't have to sacrifice anything? Or is that naive? Daniel smiled at his phone in the darkness of his kitchen. If it's naive, I'm okay with that. I've spent 3 years being realistic. It hasn't made me any happier. What would make you happy? The question sat on his screen, simple and profound. Daniel thought about it, really thought about it. Right now, knowing I'm not the only one awake at 4:30 wondering if tonight meant something. A longer pause this time. Daniel watched the dots appear and disappear twice before her response came through. You're not. It meant something. I don't know what yet, but something. They texted until sunrise, messages threading between confession and humor, depth and lightness. By the time Lily's alarm went off at 6:30, Daniel felt like he'd known Eleanor for years instead of hours. The following days developed a rhythm. Eleanor would text during her morning coffee before the demands of the day consumed her. Daniel would respond between dropping Lily at school and arriving at work. They'd exchange messages throughout the day, observations, frustrations, small moments that somehow felt significant when shared. Eleanor told him about a board member who kept interrupting her in meetings. Daniel told her about Lily's insistence that pterodactyls were dinosaurs despite his attempts to explain the technical differences. Let her have this one, Eleanor wrote. Sometimes being technically correct matters less than being enthusiastic. Spoken like someone who's never had to explain phylogenetics to an 8-year-old who's memorized the entire Jurassic Park Wikipedia page. Fair point. Technically correct might be survival. They hadn't seen each other since that night at the cafe. They'd talked about it, about meeting for coffee, for lunch, for something, but Eleanor's schedule was brutal, and Daniel's revolved entirely around Lily's needs. Every time they tried to coordinate, something intervened, until Friday morning, when everything changed. Daniel woke to his phone ringing at 5:15 a.m. He answered without checking the caller ID, his brain immediately jumping to emergency. Lily's school, his ex-wife, his mother. Daniel Hayes. His voice was rough with sleep. Daniel, it's Tom Reeves. I need you at the office. Now. Tom was Daniel's director at Meridian Security Solutions. He never called before 6 a.m. Never. What happened? Daniel was already out of bed, reaching for clothes. Massive breach. Client's entire network is compromised. We're talking financial records, customer data, proprietary systems, everything. They're hemorrhaging data and we can't stop it. Daniel's blood went cold. Which client? Whitmore Technologies. The world tilted. Say that again. Whitmore Technologies. The attack started around 3 a.m. It's sophisticated. Military-grade encryption, multi-vector assault. We've never seen anything like it. Daniel, they specifically asked for you. The CEO requested you by name. Eleanor. Eleanor was under attack. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Daniel was already pulling on pants, his mind racing through protocols and procedures. Make it 15 if you can. Daniel, this is bad. Really bad. If we can't contain this, Whitmore Technologies could be finished by Monday. Daniel ended the call and moved on autopilot. Clothes, shoes, wallet, keys. His mind was already segmenting into the cold, analytical focus he needed for crisis response. But underneath it ran a current of pure fear. Eleanor. Her company. Everything she'd built. He was halfway to the door when he remembered Lily. Lily, who was asleep in her room. Lily, who had school in 3 hours. Lily, who needed breakfast and lunch packed, and her permission slip signed for the field trip next week. Daniel stood frozen in his hallway, torn between two impossible choices. He called his ex-wife. It rang 4 times before she answered, her voice thick with sleep. Daniel, it's 5 in the morning. I know, I'm sorry. Emergency at work. I need you to take Lily today. A pause. It's your week. I know, but this is... Rachel, I can't explain everything right now, but I need you to come get her. Please. Another pause, longer this time. Rachel sighed. Fine, I'll be there in 45 minutes. Can you make it 30? Daniel, please, I'll owe you. I'll take her next weekend, both days, whatever you need. But I have to go right now and I can't leave her alone. Fine, 30 minutes. But you do owe me. Thank you. Daniel hung up and went to Lily's room. She was still asleep, curled around her stuffed triceratops. He knelt beside her bed and gently touched her shoulder. Lily, sweetheart, wake up. She stirred, blinking up at him in confusion. Daddy, is it time for school? Not yet, but I have to go to work early. There's an emergency. Your mom's coming to get you. Lily sat up, suddenly more alert. Mom? But it's your week. I know, I'm sorry. Something important came up. How important? Lily's voice had that careful quality that broke Daniel's heart, the sound of a child who'd learned too young that adults' promises were conditional. Very important. People's jobs are at stake, their security. I'm the only one who can help right now. Lily studied his face in the dim light from the hallway. Okay, she said finally. But you'll pick me up from Mom's tomorrow? You promised we'd go to the Natural History Museum. I promise. Museum tomorrow. I won't miss it. You better not. They're unveiling the new extinction exhibit. Daniel kissed her forehead. I won't miss it. I love you. Love you too, Daddy. He waited until Rachel arrived, exchanging Lily's overnight bag and a hurried explanation at the door, then ran to his car. The drive to Meridian Security Solutions usually took 30 minutes. He made it in 18. The office was chaos. Every conference room was full. Analysts hunched over laptops, their faces illuminated by scrolling code. Phones rang constantly. Someone had started a pot of coffee that already smelled burnt. Tom Reeves grabbed Daniel the moment he walked through the door. Thank God. Come on. He led Daniel to the main server room where 3 other senior analysts were already working. On the main screen, lines of code cascaded in real time. The digital signature of data being extracted from Whitmore Technologies' servers at an alarming rate. Walk me through it, Daniel said, his personal fear locked away behind professional focus. Tom pulled up a series of dashboards. Attack started at 2:47 a.m. Initial breach was through a third-party vendor integration, a scheduling software they use for facility management. Whoever did this spent months mapping their network, finding every vulnerability, every backdoor. The moment they triggered the attack, they hit simultaneously from 17 different vectors. Daniel studied the screens. his mind processing patterns and anomalies. Who discovered it? Their internal security team. They have an automated monitoring system that flagged unusual data movement. By the time they called us, the attackers had already extracted approximately 40% of their financial databases. Where's it going? That's the thing. We can't trace it. They're bouncing through multiple international servers using encryption we've never encountered. Every time we think we've found the endpoint, it shifts. Daniel pulled up a chair and started typing, his fingers flying across the keyboard. Get me direct access to their network, all administrative privileges. I need to see everything. Already done. But Daniel, their CEO, is on site. She's been in the command center since 4 a.m. She's asking for updates every 15 minutes. Of course she was. Eleanor wouldn't sit safely at home while her company bled data. Tell her I'm here, Daniel said, not looking up from his screen. Tell her I'm working on it. Tom hesitated. She specifically requested you be brought to the command center when you arrived. Daniel's hands paused on the keyboard. I need to work. I know, but she was very clear. She wants you there. Daniel wanted to argue, wanted to stay here, in the server room, where the problem was technical and solvable and didn't involve looking Eleanor in the eye while her life's work crumbled. But he understood. If he were in her position, he'd want the same thing. To look the person responsible for saving everything in the eye and know they understood what was at stake. 5 minutes, Daniel said. I'll go see her, then I need to get back to work. The command center was on the executive floor of Whitmore Technologies. Daniel had never been in the building before, despite having worked on several of their security contracts over the years. The elevator ride felt endless. The doors opened to controlled chaos. A dozen people moved between workstations, their voices low and urgent. And there, at the center of it all, stood Eleanor. She looked nothing like the woman from the cafe. Her hair was pulled back severely. She wore a navy suit that probably cost more than Daniel's monthly mortgage. Her face was pale but composed, her jaw set in determination. Then she saw him. Something flickered across her expression. Relief, fear, something too complex to name. She crossed the room in quick strides. Daniel! Eleanor! He wanted to touch her hand, to offer some gesture of comfort, but they had an audience of her employees and his colleagues. I came as soon as Tom called. I know, thank you. Her voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed her. Can you stop this? It was the question everyone wanted answered, but she was the only one brave enough to ask it directly. I'm going to try, Daniel said honestly, but I need you to understand, whoever did this is extremely sophisticated. They've been planning this for months. Even if we stop the current breach, they may have left behind multiple access points. Then we find them all. Eleanor's voice was steel. We lock them out. We rebuild every system if we have to. I don't care what it costs. I care about protecting our clients and our people. Daniel nodded. I'll need complete access to everything. No restrictions, no protected files. If something's locked, I need it unlocked. Done. Whatever you need. And I'll need your team to answer questions immediately. No delays, no running things up the chain. Every second counts. They'll answer to you directly. I'll make sure of it. They stood facing each other, the weight of the crisis pressing down between them. Daniel thought about their texts, about conversations at 4 a.m, about the fragile possibility that had been growing between them. All of it felt impossibly distant now. I should get back to work, he said. Daniel, Eleanor's voice dropped lower. I know we haven't, that this situation is... She stopped, frustrated with her own inarticulateness. Started again. I trust you. I need you to know that. The words landed like an anchor. Trust, from a woman who'd built an empire by trusting no one but herself. I won't let you down, Daniel said. He meant the company. He meant the breach. But they both knew he meant more than that. Daniel returned to the server room and didn't leave for the next 14 hours. He moved through the network like a surgeon, identifying infected systems, isolating compromised data, tracking the paths the attackers had carved through Eleanor's carefully built infrastructure. Tom brought him coffee and sandwiches he didn't eat. Other analysts came and went, reporting findings, asking questions. Daniel coordinated it all while simultaneously building a defensive barrier around the systems that weren't yet compromised. By noon, they'd stopped the bleeding. The data extraction had halted, but they still didn't know where the stolen information had gone. And they still didn't know if the attackers had left behind dormant access points that could trigger new attacks. "We need to take everything offline," Daniel said at 1 p.m., addressing the room full of analysts and Whitmore Technologies senior staff. Eleanor stood against the wall, her arms crossed, listening intently. "For how long?" asked Martin Chen, the CTO. No relation to Marcus, thank God. 72 hours minimum, maybe longer. We need to audit every system, every integration, every line of code. Anything that touches your network needs to be verified clean before we bring it back online. "That's impossible," Martin said. "We have active projects, ongoing contracts, payroll processing next week. It's necessary," Daniel interrupted. "Right now your network is a crime scene. We've stopped the immediate attack, but we haven't cleared the threat. If we bring everything back online without a complete audit, we could be handing them the keys all over again." Eleanor pushed off the wall. "Do it. Take it all offline. Martin, contact every client. Explain the situation. Offer compensation for delays. Whatever it takes." "Eleanor, the financial impact. I don't care about the financial impact. I care about doing this right. If we cut corners now and there's another breach, we're finished anyway. At least this way, we're choosing integrity over convenience." Martin looked like he wanted to argue but didn't. "I'll make the calls." Eleanor turned to Daniel. "What else do you need?" "Sleep," Tom Reeves said before Daniel could answer. "He's been at this for 14 hours straight. He needs to rest before he makes a mistake." Daniel started to protest, but Eleanor cut him off. "He's right. You're no good to us if you're running on fumes. Go home. Sleep for 6 hours. Come back fresh." "But that's not a request, Daniel. That's a direct order from the CEO." Eleanor's voice was firm, but her eyes were worried. "We'll maintain the shutdown. Nothing changes until you get back." Daniel wanted to argue, wanted to stay until every system was verified, every threat eliminated, every question answered. But he was exhausted. His eyes burned. His hands shook when he reached for his coffee cup. And he'd promised Lily he'd pick her up for the museum tomorrow. 6 hours, he agreed. "Then I'm back." 6 hours, Eleanor confirmed. Daniel gathered his things and headed for the elevator. As the doors began to close, he saw Eleanor still standing in the command center, watching him leave. She looked tired and scared and utterly alone. The doors closed before he could say anything. Daniel drove home in a daze. It was 7:30 in the evening. He'd been awake for over 14 hours, running on nothing but adrenaline and coffee. His house felt foreign when he stepped inside, too quiet, too still. He showered, set an alarm for 1 a.m., and collapsed into bed. He woke to his phone buzzing. Not his alarm, a call. Daniel grabbed it, his heart pounding, expecting Tom or another analyst reporting a new crisis. It was Eleanor. "Hello?" His voice was rough. "Did I wake you? I'm sorry. I needed to know you made it home safely." Daniel checked his clock. 11:45 p.m. He'd been asleep for just over 4 hours. "I made it. Are you still at the office?" "Yes. I sent most of the team home around 9, just a skeleton crew monitoring systems now." She paused. "I can't sleep. Every time I close my eyes, I see data streaming out of our servers and I can't stop it." "We stopped it," Daniel said gently. "The breach is contained." "For now, but you said they might have left back doors. They could be planning another attack. They could—" Her voice cracked. "They could destroy everything, Daniel. 15 years of work. Gone." Daniel sat up, fully awake now despite his exhaustion. "Eleanor, listen to me. We're going to find every vulnerability. We're going to close every door. And we're going to rebuild your security infrastructure from the ground up. It's going to take time and it's going to be expensive, but your company will survive this. You can't know that. I do know that, because I've seen you fight. I've watched you refuse to let people diminish you, refuse to accept their limitations as your own. This attack? It's just another person trying to tell you that you're not strong enough, smart enough, good enough, and you're going to prove them wrong the same way you've proven everyone else wrong." Silence on the other end. Then softly, "I'm scared." The admission broke something open in Daniel's chest. Eleanor Whitmore, admitting fear, trusting him with it. "I know," he said, "but you're not alone. I'm here." and I'm not going anywhere until this is fixed. Daniel, She stopped. Thank you for everything, for tonight, for staying, for not treating me like I'm fragile. You're not fragile. You're human. There's a difference. I forget that sometimes. I know, but I'll keep reminding you. They stayed on the phone for another hour, talking about nothing and everything. Eleanor told him about the early days of Whitmore Technologies, about sleeping on her office floor during product launches, about the exhilaration of success and the loneliness that came with it. Daniel told her about Lily's birth, about holding his daughter for the first time and feeling simultaneously powerful and terrified, about learning to braid hair from YouTube videos and attending tea parties with stuffed animals. By the time they hung up, it was past 1 a.m. Daniel's alarm was going off, but he felt more rested than 6 hours of sleep would have given him. He returned to Whitmore Technologies at 2 a.m. and found Eleanor still there, asleep in her office chair with a tablet displaying security logs in her lap. Daniel gently removed the tablet and draped his jacket over her shoulders. She didn't wake. For the next 48 hours, Daniel lived at Whitmore Technologies. He worked in shifts with his team, sleeping in 20-minute bursts when exhaustion forced him to. Eleanor brought him coffee and made sure he ate, hovering in the background with a mixture of concern and helplessness. On Saturday morning, Daniel called Rachel. I can't make the museum today, he said, hating himself. I know I promised, but I'm in the middle of something I can't leave. Rachel's sigh was heavy with disappointment, not for herself, but for Lily. She's going to be devastated, Daniel. I know. Let me talk to her. A pause, then Lily's voice. Daddy? Hey, sweetheart, I have bad news. You're not coming. Lily's voice was flat. She already knew. I can't. I'm so sorry. The work emergency I told you about, it's bigger than I thought. People are counting on me. You promised. I know, and I'm breaking my promise. I hate that I'm doing that. But Lily, if I leave now, a lot of people could lose their jobs. People with kids like you who need their parents to be able to pay for things like field trips and dinosaur books. Silence. Then, is this about that lady you met? Daniel's heart stopped. What? Mom said you've been texting someone. She said, maybe you're dating again. Is that why you're too busy for me? No, Lily, no. I'm not. This is work. Just work. The lady I met, she's... Daniel stopped. What was Eleanor? A friend? A possibility? A woman whose company was under attack and needed him? She's someone whose company needs help, that's all. Do you like her? The question was so simple, so impossibly complicated. I do, Daniel admitted, but that's not why I'm working this weekend. I'd be here helping even if I'd never met her, because it's the right thing to do. Another long silence. Okay, Lily said finally, but you owe me 2 museum trips now, and ice cream. Deal, 2 museums and all the ice cream you can eat. I'm going to hold you to that, Daddy. I know you will. I love you, Lily. Love you too. Daniel hung up and found Eleanor standing in the doorway of the conference room he'd claimed as his temporary workspace. She'd heard everything. I'm sorry, she said quietly. I didn't mean to eavesdrop. I was just... She held up a paper bag. I brought breakfast. You heard? Yes. Eleanor set the bag down on the table. You should go to the museum. I'll have Tom take over here. No, I meant what I said. People are counting on me. One person is counting on you more than anyone else, and she's 8 years old and waiting for her father to keep his promise. Daniel shook his head. We're too close. Another 12 hours and we'll have completed the full audit. I can't leave now. Eleanor sat down across from him. When I was building this company, I missed everything. My sister's wedding, my father's 65th birthday, countless holidays and dinners and moments I can never get back. I told myself it was necessary, that once I'd succeeded, I'd have all the time in the world for the people I loved. She looked directly at him, her eyes fierce. Don't make my mistakes, Daniel. Don't miss your daughter's childhood for my company, please. This isn't just about your company. This is about doing the job right. The job will still be here in 6 hours. Lily's childhood won't wait. Eleanor reached across the table and took his hand, the first time they'd touched since that night at the cafe. Go, take her to the museum. I'll personally oversee the rest of the audit, and if anything goes wrong, I'll call you immediately. But Daniel, you promised your daughter. Keep that promise. Daniel looked down at their joined hands. At this woman who'd spent her career sacrificing personal connection for professional success, now telling him not to make the same choice. Are you sure? He asked. I'm sure. Go be Lily's father. That's more important than being my security consultant. Daniel stood up, pulled Eleanor to her feet, and without thinking about consequences or professional boundaries or any of the 100 reasons he shouldn't, he kissed her. It was brief, desperate. A collision of exhaustion and gratitude and something neither of them was ready to name. When they pulled apart, Eleanor's eyes were wide. I'm sorry, Daniel said. I shouldn't have. Don't apologize. Eleanor's hand was still on his arm. Just go. Take your daughter to see the dinosaurs. And Daniel, text me when you get there. I want to know you made it safely. I will. Daniel grabbed his jacket and practically ran to his car. He made it to Rachel's house by 9 a.m., barely presentable, but grinning when Lily opened the door. Daddy, you came! I promised, didn't I? Now come on. We have extinctions to learn about. They spent 6 hours at the Natural History Museum. Lily dragged him from exhibit to exhibit, explaining in minute detail the differences between the Triassic, Jurassic, and Cretaceous periods. They ate lunch in the cafeteria surrounded by families and field trips, and Daniel didn't check his phone once. Well, almost not once. He sent Eleanor one text. Made it. Lily is currently explaining why the Mesozoic marine reptiles were technically not dinosaurs. I may never escape. Her response came immediately. Sounds perfect. Enjoy every second. When Daniel returned Lily to Rachel's house that evening, his daughter threw her arms around him. This was the best day, Daddy. Thank you for not breaking your promise. I'll always come back to you, sweetheart. Always. He drove back to Whitmore Technologies with his heart full and his resolve stronger. He would fix Eleanor's security breach. He would protect her company, but he wouldn't sacrifice his daughter to do it. When he walked back into the command center at 8 p.m., Eleanor looked up from her laptop and smiled. And Daniel knew, with absolute certainty, that everything had changed between them. The systems came back online 76 hours after the breach began. Daniel stood in the command center watching green indicators flood across the monitoring screens, each one representing a verified, secured system. Behind him, Eleanor's entire technical team held their collective breath. That's the last one, Tom Reeves said quietly. We're clean. A ragged cheer went up. People hugged. Someone opened a bottle of champagne that had been sitting in the break room refrigerator for exactly this moment. Martin Chen clapped Daniel on the shoulder so hard he nearly stumbled. But Daniel couldn't celebrate yet. He was already pulling up the final audit reports, triple-checking the encryption protocols, verifying that every single backdoor had been found and sealed. Daniel, Eleanor's voice cut through the noise. It's done. You did it. We did it, he corrected, finally allowing himself to look at her. She looked exhausted. They all did. But there was something else in her expression now. Relief, pride. And when their eyes met, something that made his chest tight. I need to address the team, Eleanor said, and then I need to call the board. But after that, she hesitated. Will you stay, just for a few minutes? Of course. Daniel watched as Eleanor moved to the center of the room, commanding attention without raising her voice. She thanked everyone individually, naming specific contributions, acknowledging the personal sacrifices they'd made. When she got to Daniel, she simply said, Daniel Hayes saved this company. Remember that name? The weight of those words settled over him like a mantle. Recognition. Respect. And from Eleanor, something that felt dangerously close to admiration. The team filtered out gradually until only Eleanor and Daniel remained in the command center. The sun was rising outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, painting the city in shades of gold and pink. I haven't seen a sunrise from this office in years, Eleanor said softly. I'm usually here before dawn and gone after dark. I'd forgotten it could look like this. Daniel moved to stand beside her at the window. Beautiful. Yes. But she wasn't looking at the sunrise. She was looking at him. The moment stretched between them, heavy with everything unspoken. The kiss from 3 days ago hung in the air like a question neither of them knew how to answer. Eleanor, don't, she interrupted gently. Don't apologize for the kiss. Don't tell me it was a mistake or that you weren't thinking clearly. I've had enough people tell me what I should feel and how I should react. If you regret it, just say so, but don't apologize for it. Daniel turned to face her fully. I don't regret it. Good. Neither do I. But we should probably talk about what it means. Eleanor laughed, short and sharp. Should we? I'm 48 years old and you're, what, 42? 43. 43. You have a daughter who needs you. I have a company that demands everything. You work for a security firm that contracts with my organization. There are about 17 different reasons why this is complicated. 18, probably, Daniel said. I'm not great at math, but I can think of a few more. So what do we do? Daniel considered the question. 3 weeks ago, he would have walked away. Would have told himself that complicated wasn't worth it, that safe was better than sorry, that Lily deserved a father who didn't bring chaos into their carefully ordered life. But 3 weeks ago, he hadn't known what it felt like to talk to Eleanor at 4 a.m. Hadn't known that someone could look at him and see not just a single father with baggage, but a man worth knowing. Hadn't kissed her, and felt like maybe, just maybe, he deserved something more than the safe, lonely existence he'd built. I think, he said carefully, we should be honest about what we want, about what scares us, about all 18 complications. I want to see you again, Eleanor said immediately. Not as CEO and security consultant, as Eleanor and Daniel. I want to have dinner somewhere that isn't a cafe or an office. I want to know what your house looks like and what kind of books you read and whether you're a morning person or a night person. I want... She stopped, catching herself. I want things I convinced myself I was too old to want. You're not too old. Daniel reached for her hand. And for the record, I want all of those things too. But I need you to understand that Lily comes first, always. If this, whatever this is, if it interferes with being her father, I'll choose her. I would expect nothing less. In fact, I'd lose respect for you if you didn't. Eleanor squeezed his hand. I don't want to be a complication in your daughter's life. I want to be... She paused, searching for the right word. I want to be someone who makes your life better, not harder. If I can't be that, then we should stop now. You already make my life better, Daniel said, just by existing. Just by being someone who understands what it's like to be told you're not enough. They stood there in the sunrise-painted command center, holding hands like teenagers, both terrified and exhilarated by what they were choosing. I have to call the board, Eleanor said finally. They'll want a full report. I should go home, sleep, shower, maybe remember what my daughter looks like. When can I see you again? Tomorrow? No, wait, I have Lily tomorrow. Daniel pulled out his phone, checking his calendar. Wednesday? I could do dinner Wednesday. Wednesday, Eleanor agreed. A real dinner, somewhere with cloth napkins and wine lists. Somewhere Marcus Chen would never go, Daniel added. Eleanor smiled, genuinely smiled, for the first time in days. Definitely somewhere Marcus Chen would never go. They parted at the elevator, neither willing to kiss again in Eleanor's office, where security cameras watched and professional boundaries mattered, but their hands held until the very last moment, fingers reluctant to let go. Daniel drove home in a daze of exhaustion and anticipation. He slept for 12 hours, woke up to 17 missed calls from Tom Reeves about documentation, and spent Tuesday afternoon with Lily building a diorama of the Cretaceous period for her science class. Daddy, you're not listening, Lily complained, holding up 2 plastic dinosaurs. I said the Tyrannosaurus rex, rex, wouldn't have lived at the same time as the Stegosaurus. They were from different periods. You're absolutely right. I'm sorry, sweetheart. I'm a little distracted. Lily studied him with the uncanny perception of children everywhere. Is it because of work or because of that lady? Daniel set down the tube of glue he'd been holding. Why do you keep asking about the lady? Because you smile different when you talk about her, like when you used to talk about Mom, before everything got sad. The observation hit Daniel square in the chest. Do I? Yeah, it's nice. I like when you're happy. Lily went back to arranging plastic ferns around her dinosaurs. Is she nice? Very nice. Does she like dinosaurs? I don't know. We haven't talked about dinosaurs specifically. Well, you should find out. It's important. Lily positioned her T-Rex near a water feature made from blue construction paper. Katie's mom's new boyfriend didn't like that Katie was obsessed with horses, and Katie said it made everything weird. I'll make sure to ask her about dinosaurs, Daniel promised solemnly. On Wednesday evening, Daniel dropped Lily at Rachel's house with her overnight bag and drove to the restaurant Eleanor had chosen. It was called Meridian, not to be confused with his employer, and it occupied the top floor of a building downtown with views that cost as much as the food. Eleanor was already there when he arrived, seated at a corner table with those spectacular views spread out behind her. She wore a deep green dress that made her look sophisticated and slightly dangerous. Daniel felt underdressed in his best shirt and the one tie he owned that didn't have a coffee stain. "You look terrified," Eleanor said as he sat down. "Little bit," Daniel admitted. "I haven't been on a real date in 4 years. I've forgotten how this works." "So have I. We can be disasters together." The waiter appeared with menus and wine recommendations. Eleanor ordered a bottle of something red that Daniel pretended to understand. When they were alone again, silence settled awkwardly between them. "This is weird," Eleanor said finally. "So weird," Daniel agreed. "We've texted for hours about everything under the sun, but now that we're actually sitting across from each other with cloth napkins and wine glasses, I have no idea what to say. We could talk about the breach, very romantic dinner conversation. Or we could talk about Lily's diorama, also incredibly romantic." Eleanor laughed and the awkwardness cracked. "Tell me about the diorama. What period?" "Cretaceous. She's very particular about chronological accuracy. Apparently I suggested using a stegosaurus and was thoroughly corrected." "Smart girl." "Too smart. Sometimes I think she's teaching me more than I'm teaching her." Daniel paused as the waiter poured wine. "She asked about you, actually. Wanted to know if you like dinosaurs." "Tell her I'm neutral on dinosaurs, but very interested in learning more. Does that pass?" "I'll convey the message." Daniel took a sip of wine, grateful for something to do with his hands. "This is good. I have no idea what it is, but it's good. It's a Bordeaux, 2012. I have no idea if that matters, but the sommelier seemed enthusiastic." Eleanor set down her glass and looked at him directly. "Daniel, can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Why did you walk over to my table that night, at the cafe? You could have just thought Marcus was terrible and moved on with your evening, but you didn't. Why?" Daniel thought about it, trying to articulate something he'd mostly felt rather than reasoned through. "Because I recognized the look on your face, that careful blankness that's really just armor against pain. I'd worn that same look too many times, and I thought, maybe this one time someone should cross the room and say that the cruelty was wrong, that you didn't deserve it. You didn't know me. No, but I knew what it felt like to sit alone and absorb someone else's judgment of your worth. And I guess I wanted to be the person I'd wished would appear in those moments for me." Eleanor's eyes were bright with something that might have been tears, but she blinked them back. "I'm glad you did. Walk over, I mean. That night changed everything. For me, too." They ordered dinner. Eleanor chose salmon, Daniel chose steak, and the conversation finally found its rhythm. They talked about first jobs and worst jobs, about college experiences and career ambitions. Eleanor told him about starting Whitmore Technologies in her spare bedroom with nothing but an idea and dangerous amounts of credit card debt. "Everyone said I was crazy," she said. "A woman in tech, trying to compete with established companies. No business degree, no investors. The bank officer who denied my business loan literally told me to get a job as someone's assistant and learn how the real world worked." "What did you do?" "Maxed out 3 credit cards, slept 4 hours a night for 2 years, and proved him wrong." Eleanor smiled at the memory. "The same bank tried to court our business 5 years later. I took great pleasure in declining." "Petty. I like it. Sometimes petty is all we have." Eleanor's expression sobered. "But it was lonely, Daniel. Building something that big, that fast. I worked with people, sure, had employees, partners, clients, but no one really knew me. They knew Eleanor Whitmore, CEO, not Eleanor who sometimes ate cereal for dinner and cried in the shower when things got too hard." "I eat cereal for dinner at least twice a week," Daniel said. "Lily thinks it's hilarious. She calls it backwards breakfast." See, that's the thing I missed. Those small moments with someone who knows you, who sees the messy parts and doesn't flinch. Eleanor reached across the table, her fingers stopping just short of his. I convinced myself I didn't need that. That professional success was enough. But it's not, is it? Daniel closed the distance, taking her hand. No, it's not. Their food arrived, and they ate while talking about lighter things. Favorite movies, books they'd meant to read, places they'd like to travel. Eleanor confessed she'd never left the country despite being able to afford to go anywhere. Daniel admitted he couldn't remember the last time he'd gone to a movie that wasn't animated. We should fix that, Eleanor said. Both of those things. Are you proposing we go to France and watch R-rated movies? Maybe not in that order, but yes, essentially. They were laughing when Eleanor's phone buzzed. She ignored it. It buzzed again, then again. You should check that, Daniel said. Could be important. Eleanor picked up her phone, her expression shifting from amused to concerned to furious in the space of 3 seconds. What is it? The board. Eleanor's voice was tight. They've called an emergency meeting. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., mandatory attendance. About the breach? They don't say, but it's never good when they call emergency meetings. She was already typing a response. I need to prepare, review all the documentation, get ahead of their questions. Eleanor, Daniel waited until she looked up. You handled the breach perfectly. The company is secure. Client data is safe. What else could they possibly want? But even as he said it, he saw the fear in her eyes. She knew what they wanted. They wanted blood. The rest of dinner was subdued. Eleanor tried to stay present, but Daniel could see her mind racing through scenarios and preparations. When the check came, split after a brief argument that Eleanor won, they walked out into the cool evening air. I should go home, Eleanor said. Start working on my presentation for tomorrow. Will you let me know how it goes? Of course. She hesitated, then stepped closer and kissed him. It was slower than their first kiss, more deliberate. A promise instead of a question. Thank you for tonight, for reminding me that there's more to life than board meetings and quarterly earnings. Oh, thank you for risking a date with a disaster of a single father. You're not a disaster. You're wonderful. Eleanor touched his face gently. I'll call you tomorrow, after the meeting. Daniel watched her walk to her car, a sleek black sedan that probably cost more than his annual salary. She waved before driving away, and he waved back, feeling the familiar ache of wanting more time. The next morning, Eleanor arrived at Whitmore Technologies at 7 a.m. She'd spent the entire night preparing a comprehensive presentation on the breach, the response, the recovery, and the new security measures being implemented. Every question anticipated, every answer rehearsed. The board meeting was scheduled for 9. At 8:45, Eleanor's assistant knocked on her office door. They're ready for you, Patricia said quietly. Her expression was sympathetic in a way that made Eleanor's stomach drop. 15 minutes early? They asked if you could come now. Never a good sign. Eleanor gathered her materials and walked to the boardroom with her spine straight and her game face on. The board was already assembled. 12 faces, most of whom she'd worked with for years. Some friendly, some neutral, some openly hostile. Robert Blackwell sat at the head of the table, his expression carefully blank. Eleanor, thank you for coming early. Robert gestured to the empty chair. Please sit. Eleanor remained standing. I've prepared a comprehensive overview of the security breach and our response. I think you'll find we've reviewed the technical reports, Robert interrupted. That's not why we're here. The room went very still. Then why are we here? Eleanor kept her voice level. Robert exchanged glances with several other board members. Eleanor, you've led this company for 15 years. Under your guidance, we've achieved remarkable growth in market position. Past tense. They were using past tense. However, Robert continued, the board has growing concerns about the company's direction. The breach, while handled competently, revealed vulnerabilities in our systems that should never have existed. Our quarterly earnings have plateaued. Our competitors are gaining ground. And frankly, he paused, choosing his words carefully. The market is evolving faster than our current leadership can adapt. The breach was sophisticated and coordinated, Eleanor said, her voice hardening. It could have happened to any company, and our earnings have plateaued because we've prioritized sustainable growth over reckless expansion. That's not a weakness. That's strategy. Perhaps, said Jennifer Kwan from the far end of the table. But the optics are concerning. Our stock price dropped 8% when news of the breach went public. Investors are nervous. They're asking questions about leadership stability. Stock prices fluctuate. They'll recover once we announce our new security infrastructure. They might recover faster with new leadership, Robert said quietly. There it was, the executioner's blade, falling. Eleanor's hands clenched at her sides. You're asking me to step down. We're suggesting a transition plan, Jennifer corrected. Perhaps a move to an advisory role, emeritus position. You'd still be connected to the company, but day-to-day operations would fall to someone with fresh perspective. Someone younger, Eleanor said flatly. The silence that followed was answer enough. This isn't about age, Robert insisted. It's about evolution. The tech sector moves fast. Investors want leadership that reflects that dynamism. I've been dynamic for 15 years. I built this company from nothing. I've adapted to every market shift, every technological change, every industry disruption. What I haven't done is make reckless decisions to inflate short-term stock prices at the expense of long-term stability. No one's questioning your past contributions, Jennifer said in that patronizing tone that made everything worse. We're simply suggesting that perhaps it's time to think about legacy, about succession planning. I'm 48, not 85, and we have tremendous respect for everything you've accomplished at 48, Robert said smoothly, which is precisely why we'd like you to consider this carefully. We're offering a generous severance package, full vesting of all stock options, a consulting contract for 3 years. This doesn't have to be adversarial. Eleanor looked around the table at the faces she'd worked with for years. Some wouldn't meet her eyes. Others looked vaguely uncomfortable, but not one of them was speaking up in her defense. How long have you been planning this? She asked quietly. Robert had the grace to look ashamed. The discussion began several months ago. The breach accelerated our timeline. Several months. Eleanor felt something crack inside her chest. You've been waiting for an excuse, any excuse, to push me out. Eleanor, no. Her voice cut like glass. Let me be clear. I'm not interested in your emeritus position. I'm not interested in your consulting contract. And I'm sure as hell not interested in pretending this is anything other than what it is, a group of people who've decided I'm too old to be useful. This isn't personal, Jennifer said. Everything is personal. Eleanor gathered her materials with shaking hands. You want me gone? Then vote. Call the question. Remove me officially. But don't insult my intelligence by pretending this is a friendly transition. We hoped you'd be reasonable, Robert said. Reasonable. Eleanor laughed, sharp and bitter. You mean compliant. You mean quiet. You mean grateful that you're letting me leave with dignity instead of dragging me out by force. She walked toward the door, then turned back. I built this company. I saved it from bankruptcy twice. I've generated billions in value. And you're removing me because investors want someone who looks better in photographs. She left before anyone could respond, walking past Patricia's sympathetic face, past the executive offices where people were already whispering, past the conference rooms where her employees worked on projects she'd greenlit. Eleanor made it to her office, closed the door, and stood at the window overlooking the city she'd conquered. Then, finally, she let herself shake. Her phone buzzed. A text from Robert. The vote is scheduled for next Tuesday. We'd prefer your resignation before then. Saves everyone the embarrassment. Eleanor stared at the message, at the casual cruelty of it. Saves everyone the embarrassment. As if her humiliation was a minor inconvenience to be managed. She thought about Marcus Chen in the cafe, telling her that successful men didn't choose women her age, about Jennifer Kwan's patronizing tone suggesting she think about legacy, about a lifetime of being told she was too much or not enough, too ambitious or too old, too successful or too threatening. And she thought about Daniel telling her that life didn't end at 48, that she wasn't fragile, just human. Eleanor picked up her phone and called him. He answered on the second ring. Hey, how did the meeting go? They want me to resign. Her voice cracked on the word. They're voting me out next Tuesday. What? Eleanor? I'm too old, apparently. Bad optics. The market wants younger leadership. It's the cafe all over again, just corporate. She was crying now, hot, angry tears she couldn't stop. 15 years, Daniel. 15 years I gave them, and they're throwing me away like I'm obsolete technology. Where are you? My office. I'm coming. Stay there. You don't have to. I'm already in my car. Stay there, Eleanor. I'm coming. He hung up before she could argue. Eleanor sank into her desk chair and waited. Around her, the office that had been her second home for 15 years felt foreign, hostile, like it was already calculating how quickly it could replace her. 23 minutes later, Daniel burst through her office door. He must have broken every traffic law to get there that fast. He crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled her out of her chair and into his arms. Eleanor broke. She cried against his shoulder, ugly, gasping sobs that shook her entire body. Daniel held her through all of it, one hand rubbing circles on her back, the other cradling her head. I'm sorry, she finally managed. I'm sorry. This is unprofessional. And stop apologizing for being human. Daniel pulled back just enough to see her face. What happened? Tell me everything. Eleanor told him. About the meeting, about Robert's past tense verbiage, about Jennifer's legacy comments, and the vote scheduled for Tuesday. Daniel listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each detail. This is wrong, he said when she finished. This is so fundamentally wrong. It's business. They have the right to vote out leadership if they think it's in the company's best interest. That's not what this is. This is a group of people using your age and gender as an excuse to replace you with someone they find less threatening. Daniel paced her office, his anger palpable. After everything you've done, after you saved the company from the breach, after 15 years of success, this is how they repay you? Welcome to being a woman in tech, Eleanor said bitterly. No, we're not accepting this. Daniel stopped pacing and looked at her directly. Fight them. Daniel, fight them, Eleanor. Don't just resign because they're making you uncomfortable. Make them vote. Make them go on record removing one of the most successful CEOs in the industry because she had the audacity to turn 48. And then what? They'll still vote me out. I'll just be humiliated publicly instead of privately. Maybe. Or maybe you remind them exactly who they're dealing with. Daniel moved closer, taking her hands. You told me you've adapted to every market shift, that you've built something sustainable while others chased reckless growth. So prove it. Give them data they can't argue with. Make them see that removing you would be the stupidest decision they've ever made. Eleanor wanted to believe him, wanted to think that facts and data could overcome the simple truth that they'd already decided she was expendable. But looking at Daniel's face, at his absolute conviction that she was worth fighting for, something shifted inside her. Maybe she couldn't change their minds, but she could damn sure make them work for it. I'd need help, she said slowly. Financial models, comparative analysis, market projections. I'll help. Whatever you need. Daniel, you have Lily. You have your job. You can't just, yes, I can. His voice was firm. Lily's at her mom's until Sunday, and Tom owes me approximately 800 hours of vacation time. I'm here. Whatever you need, however long it takes. Eleanor looked at this man who'd walked across a cafe to defend a stranger, who'd spent 76 hours saving her company, who was now offering to help her fight for her position despite every reasonable argument against it. And she made a choice. Okay, she said. Let's fight. They worked through the night. Eleanor's office became a war room. Daniel commandeered her conference table, spreading out financial reports, market analyses, and competitive intelligence documents that Eleanor hadn't looked at in months. She made coffee that got cold before they drank it and ordered Thai food that arrived at midnight. Tell me about the first 5 years, Daniel said, his laptop open to a spreadsheet that already had more tabs than Eleanor could count. Revenue, client acquisition, everything. I need to build a timeline that shows consistent growth. Eleanor pulled up archived files, walking him through the early days when every client had felt like a miracle and every contract renewal like a stay of execution. First year revenue was $240,000. Second year, $800,000. Third year, we broke $2 million. Exponential growth. Daniel was typing furiously. What changed in year 3? We landed the Morrison account. It was our first Fortune 500 client. That contract opened doors everywhere else. Eleanor remembered the phone call that had changed everything. The client rep saying they'd chosen Whitmore Technologies over three larger competitors because Eleanor had been the only one who actually listened to their needs instead of pitching prepackaged solutions. "In years 4 through 15, Daniel asked. "Steady upward trajectory. Some years better than others, but always profitable, always growing." Eleanor pulled up more data, feeding Daniel numbers that told the story of 15 years of careful strategy and calculated risks. By 3 in the morning, Daniel had built a financial model that would have made any analyst weep with joy. Color-coded charts showed Whitmore Technologies' performance against competitors. Projected growth curves demonstrated that Eleanor's sustainable approach had actually outperformed aggressive expansion strategies over the long term. "Look at this," Daniel said, turning his laptop toward her. "Your company's 15-year return on investment is 43% higher than your three largest competitors. Your customer retention rate is 91%. Industry average is 64. Your employee satisfaction scores are in the 98th percentile." Eleanor stared at the data. She'd known her company was successful, but seeing it quantified this way, seeing the proof that her leadership had created something genuinely exceptional, hit differently at 3 in the morning with her career on the line. "They're still going to vote me out," she said quietly. "Maybe, but they're going to have to explain why they're removing someone with this track record. They're going to have to go on record saying that none of this matters because the person who achieved it is 48 years old." Daniel closed his laptop. "And Eleanor, that explanation is going to follow them forever. Every news article, every analyst report, every investor call, they'll have to defend why they chose optics over excellence. You're assuming people will care. I'm assuming you'll make them care." Daniel stood up and stretched, his back cracking audibly. "But right now we both need sleep. Come on." "I should stay. Keep working." "You should rest. You're presenting to the board in 5 days. You need to be sharp, not exhausted." He held out his hand. "Come on, I'll drive you home." Eleanor wanted to argue, but exhaustion was making her eyes blur and her thoughts fuzzy. She let Daniel drive her to the penthouse, too tired to care about professional boundaries or what her doorman might think about her arriving at 4 in the morning with a man who looked as exhausted as she felt. "Thank you," she said as they stood in her building's marble lobby, "for tonight, for all of this." "We're not done yet." Daniel tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture so casual and intimate that it made Eleanor's breath catch. "Get some sleep. I'll pick you up at noon and we'll keep working. You need sleep too." "I'll sleep in my own bed for a few hours. Then I'm coming back. This is what fighting looks like, Eleanor. You don't do it alone." He kissed her forehead and left before she could protest further. Eleanor rode the elevator to her penthouse and collapsed into bed, still wearing her clothes. She slept for 5 hours and woke to sunlight streaming through her windows and 3 missed calls from Robert Blackwell. She didn't call him back. Instead, she showered, dressed in jeans and a sweater that felt like armor of a different kind, and was waiting in her lobby when Daniel arrived at noon carrying 2 large coffees and a bag from a bakery. "Fuel," he said, handing her a coffee, "and sugar. You're going to need both." They spent the next 4 days building Eleanor's defense. Daniel worked with the intensity that reminded Eleanor why he'd been able to stop the breach when others couldn't. He saw patterns, connections, implications that no one else noticed. He built models that didn't just show what Whitmore Technologies had achieved, but why those achievements mattered. "Your customer retention rate isn't just good," he explained on Saturday afternoon, showing her a comparison chart. "It's extraordinary. In an industry where companies regularly lose 40% of their clients year over year, you're keeping 91%. Do you know what that says about the quality of your relationships? The reliability of your service?" "It says I don't burn bridges for short-term gains." "Exactly. And that's what sustainable growth looks like." Daniel pulled up another slide. "Here's what happens when companies prioritize aggressive expansion over stability. See the spike in year 3? That's rapid client acquisition. Looks impressive. But look what happens in year 5, massive client loss. They couldn't deliver on promises. They overextended. Revenue collapsed." Eleanor studied the chart, recognizing the pattern. She'd watched competitors rise and fall following exactly this trajectory. "The board wants me to be more like them." The board doesn't understand that slow and steady actually wins. They're looking at quarterly fluctuations instead of long-term trends. Your job is to make them see the bigger picture. On Sunday evening, with the presentation 90% complete, Daniel's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and his expression shifted. "It's Lily. I need to take this." He stepped into Eleanor's kitchen, and she heard his voice change to the particular warmth he reserved for his daughter. "Hey, sweetheart, how was your week?" Eleanor couldn't hear Lily's responses, but she could hear Daniel's side of the conversation. "I know. I'm sorry I couldn't make it to your game. How did it go? Did you score?" "That's amazing. I'm so proud of you." "No, I can't pick you up tonight. Tomorrow morning, I promise. Something important came up at work." "No, different work. I'm helping someone with a big project." A pause. Eleanor imagined Lily asking questions, making connections with the unsettling perceptiveness of children. "Yes, the lady I mentioned, her name is Eleanor. She's in trouble and needs help, so I'm helping her. I know I've been gone a lot, I'm sorry, but this is almost done, and then I promise I'll be around more." "Wednesday?" "Yeah, Wednesday works for the museum. We can see the new mineral collection you were talking about." Another pause, longer this time. "I love you too, Lilypad. Sleep well. I'll see you tomorrow morning." Daniel returned to the living room looking guilty and tired. "I'm the worst father in the world." "You're helping me save my career. That doesn't make you a bad father." "I missed her soccer game yesterday. I've been at your place or your office every day this week. Rachel called this morning to tell me that Lily asked if I was going to move in with the work lady." Daniel sat down heavily on Eleanor's couch. "She's 8. She shouldn't have to wonder if her father's priorities have shifted." Eleanor sat beside him, close but not touching. "Have they?" "No. Maybe. I don't know." Daniel rubbed his face. "She'll always be my first priority. But Eleanor, this matters too. You matter, and I can't just walk away and let them destroy you. Even if fighting for me means missing time with Lily, I'm not missing time with her, I'm just redistributing it." But the words sounded hollow even to Daniel's own ears. "Okay, yes, I'm missing time with her, and I hate that, but she's safe with Rachel, and this is temporary, and teaching her that sometimes you fight for people who matter. That's important too, isn't it?" Eleanor wanted to agree, wanted to believe that she was worth the sacrifice, but she kept thinking about what she'd told Daniel at the restaurant, about all the moments she'd missed while building her company. "You should go home," she said quietly. "Spend tomorrow with Lily. I can finish the presentation myself." "No way. We're almost done. Just the conclusion and the supporting documentation. Daniel, Eleanor, I'm here because I choose to be, not because you asked, not because I feel obligated, because I believe you deserve to fight, and I want to help you do it. So please, let me help." They looked at each other across the small distance of her couch, and Eleanor felt the weight of everything unspoken. This thing between them, this relationship that was too new to have a name but too significant to ignore, was becoming real in ways that complicated both their lives. "After Tuesday," Eleanor said, "after the board meeting, whatever happens, we need to talk, really talk, about what this is and what it means." "Agreed." Daniel reached for her hand. "But right now, we finish this presentation. Make it so good they'd be idiots to vote you out." They worked until midnight, fine-tuning every slide, anticipating every possible question, building counter-arguments for arguments that hadn't been made yet. When Daniel finally left, kissing Eleanor goodnight in her doorway, the presentation was complete. Monday morning, Eleanor woke at 5 a.m. and rehearsed her opening statement in the mirror. By 6, she was reciting the key data points from memory. By 7, she'd run through the entire presentation 3 times without notes. Her phone rang at 8:30. Robert Blackwell. She almost didn't answer, then thought better of it. "Robert, Eleanor, I wanted to check in before tomorrow, see if you'd reconsidered our offer." "You mean your suggestion that I resign to save everyone embarrassment?" "I mean our generous severance package that allows you to exit with dignity." Robert's voice was carefully neutral. "The vote is happening tomorrow, Eleanor. Fighting it won't change the outcome. It will just make things messy." "Messy for whom?" "For everyone. For you, certainly, but also for the company, for your legacy. If you resign now, the narrative is that you're stepping down on your own terms. If we vote you out, the narrative becomes that you were removed. Which version do you want in the business press?" Eleanor felt rage bubbling up, hot and sharp. I want the version where a successful CEO isn't pushed out because the board thinks she's too old, but apparently that's not an option. This isn't about age. Robert, please don't insult my intelligence. We both know exactly what this is about. You want someone younger because investors like seeing fresh faces in leadership photos. You want someone who looks dynamic, even if their actual results are mediocre. You want the optics of innovation without the substance. That's not fair. Neither is this conversation. I'll see you tomorrow at 9, Robert, and I'm not resigning. She hung up before he could respond. The rest of Monday passed in a blur of anxiety and preparation. Eleanor must have reviewed her presentation 20 times. Daniel called 3 times to offer encouragement and once to remind her to eat something. Patricia, her assistant, brought her files she'd requested and didn't comment on the fact that Eleanor was clearly preparing for battle. At 6 p.m., Eleanor's phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. You're going to be amazing tomorrow. They're going to see exactly what they're trying to throw away, and they're going to feel like idiots. Get some sleep. I'll be thinking about you. Eleanor typed back, Thank you for everything. I couldn't do this without you. His response came immediately. You could, but I'm glad you don't have to. She tried to sleep that night, but kept waking up in a panic, convinced she'd forgotten something crucial. By 5 a.m., she gave up and went to her office. The building was almost empty, just a few early arriving employees who nodded at her in the hallways. Eleanor set up in the boardroom 2 hours before the meeting. She tested the presentation equipment 3 times. She arranged her notes precisely on the table. She practiced her opening statement standing at the head of the table where she'd sat for 15 years making decisions that had shaped thousands of lives. At 8:45, board members began arriving. They clustered in small groups, talking in low voices that stopped whenever Eleanor looked their way. Robert arrived at 8:50, his expression carefully neutral. Jennifer Kwan came in last, barely acknowledging Eleanor's presence. At precisely 9 a.m., Robert called the meeting to order. Thank you all for coming. As you know, we're here to discuss leadership succession at Whitmore Technologies. Eleanor has requested the opportunity to present before we move to a vote. He looked at her directly. Eleanor, the floor is yours. Eleanor stood. Her hands were shaking, but she gripped the edge of the table until they steadied. 15 years ago, she began, her voice clear and strong, I started this company with $240,000 in revenue, 6 employees, and more rejected investor pitches than I could count. Today, Whitmore Technologies generates $850 million annually, employs over 3,000 people, and maintains a 91% customer retention rate. She clicked to the first slide, a timeline of the company's growth. I'm not here to beg for my job. I'm here to present facts, to show you, with data, what removing me would mean, not for me, for the company, for our employees, for our shareholders. The next slide showed customer retention rates compared to competitors. Eleanor watched as several board members leaned forward, surprised by the disparity. Our competitors chase rapid growth. They acquire clients aggressively, overpromise results, and burn relationships. We build sustainable partnerships. We deliver consistent value. We prioritize long-term stability over short-term gains. This isn't a weakness. It's a strategy that has generated a 15-year return on investment 43% higher than our 3 largest competitors. Click. Financial performance charts appeared. Eleanor walked them through every metric that mattered. Revenue growth, profit margins, market share expansion, employee satisfaction scores that indicated a healthy, stable corporate culture. Client testimonials that spoke to reliability and innovation. Last week, we survived a sophisticated cyber attack that would have destroyed most companies. We not only survived, we emerged stronger. Our response time was exceptional. Our communication with clients was transparent. Our technical team, led by some of the best security professionals in the industry, contained the breach and rebuilt our infrastructure to be even more secure. She paused, making eye contact with each board member in turn. I understand that some of you have concerns about the company's direction, about market evolution, about leadership that can adapt to change. So let me be clear about what adaptation looks like. Click. The next slide showed innovation initiatives Eleanor had spearheaded: AI integration, cloud infrastructure upgrades, sustainability programs that had reduced the company's carbon footprint by 30% while cutting operational costs. Adaptation isn't about age. It's about willingness to learn, to pivot, to recognize when the market demands something new. I've been adapting for 15 years. I'll continue adapting for the next 15 if you'll let me. She could see the shift happening. Board members who'd arrived looking certain were now looking uncertain. Robert's carefully neutral expression had cracked into something that might have been concern. Even Jennifer Kwan was studying the slides instead of her phone. "I know what you're really worried about," Eleanor said, her voice softening slightly. "You're worried that a 48-year-old woman leading a tech company sends the wrong message to investors. That younger leadership would be more appealing, more dynamic." She clicked to a new slide, photos of tech CEOs, all men, ranging in age from 45 to 72. These men lead our competitors. The youngest is 45. The oldest is 72. Not one of them has faced a board vote questioning their ability to lead due to age. Not one of them has been told that investors need to see fresh faces. Why? Because age discrimination only cuts one way, and it cuts deepest for women. The room was completely silent now. "I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm asking for the same consideration you'd give any CEO with my track record. Look at the data. Look at the results. Look at 15 years of consistent, sustainable, profitable growth. Then ask yourselves, are we really willing to throw that away because we think the optics would be better with someone younger?" Eleanor advanced to her final slide. It was simple, just a single line of text. Leadership isn't about age, it's about results. She closed her laptop and looked around the table. "I've given you facts, data, proof of what I've built, and what I can continue to build. The choice is yours. But before you vote, ask yourself, what message does it send if we remove successful leadership because of age? What precedent does it set? And what kind of company do we want to be?" Eleanor gathered her materials and walked out of the boardroom, leaving them to deliberate. She made it to her office before her legs gave out. She collapsed into her chair and stared at the ceiling, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. Her phone buzzed. Daniel. How did it go? Eleanor's hands were shaking too badly to type. She called him instead. "I don't know," she said when he answered. "I said everything we prepared. I showed them all the data. They're voting now." "How did they react?" "I couldn't tell. Some of them looked surprised. Some looked uncomfortable. Robert looked like he wanted to argue, but couldn't find the angle." Eleanor pressed her free hand against her chest, trying to slow her racing heart. "Daniel, what if it wasn't enough? What if they vote me out anyway?" "Then you walk out of there knowing you fought, that you didn't let them push you out quietly, that you made them face exactly what they're doing." Daniel's voice was steady, an anchor in the storm. "But Eleanor, I think you changed minds in there. I think you reminded them why you're irreplaceable. You weren't even there. You don't know that. I know you, and I know that when you fight, you win." Eleanor wanted to believe him, wanted to think that facts and data could overcome bias and fear. But she'd been fighting uphill battles her entire career, and she knew that sometimes the outcome had nothing to do with merit. "They're going to call me back in soon," she said, "to announce their decision. I'll stay on the phone until they do." "You don't have to." "I'm staying." So Daniel stayed on the line while Eleanor waited. They didn't talk much, just the occasional comment about nothing, the kind of comfortable silence that only existed between people who understood each other. 27 minutes later, Patricia knocked on Eleanor's door. "They're ready for you," she said gently. Eleanor's stomach dropped. "Okay." "Eleanor," Daniel's voice came through the phone. "Whatever happens, I'm proud of you." "Thank you," Eleanor whispered. "I'll call you after." She ended the call and walked back to the boardroom on legs that felt like water. The board was seated exactly as they'd been before, but the atmosphere had changed. Robert looked tired. Jennifer Kwan wouldn't meet Eleanor's eyes. Several other board members were studying their hands. "Eleanor, please sit," Robert said. She remained standing. "I'd prefer to hear this on my feet." Robert nodded slowly. "We've taken a vote on the question of leadership succession. The motion to remove you from your position as CEO required a 2/3 majority to pass." Eleanor's heart was hammering so hard she felt lightheaded. "The motion failed," Robert said quietly. 7 voted in favor of removal. 5 voted against. The motion did not achieve the required majority. Eleanor's knees nearly buckled. She gripped the back of the nearest chair. However, Robert continued, and Eleanor's brief relief evaporated, the board has serious concerns that need to be addressed. We're implementing a 6-month review period. During that time, you'll report directly to the board on all major decisions. We'll assess market performance, stock price movement, and investor confidence. At the end of 6 months, we'll revisit this question. So I'm on probation, Eleanor said flatly. You're being given the opportunity to prove that our concerns are unfounded, Jennifer Kwan said. Frankly, Eleanor, your presentation today was compelling, but data is only part of the picture. We need to see sustained performance, continued growth, evidence that you can lead this company into the next decade. I've been leading this company successfully for 15 years. And the next 15 may look very different, Robert said. We're not asking you to resign. We're asking you to demonstrate over the next 6 months that you're still the right person for this role. Eleanor looked around the table at the faces of people she'd worked with for years. Some looked relieved. Some looked uncomfortable. None looked particularly happy with the compromise they'd reached. Fine, Eleanor said. 6 months. But I wanted on record that I presented data showing 15 years of exceptional performance. And instead of trusting that track record, you're requiring me to prove myself all over again. I also wanted on record that you wouldn't ask this of a male CEO with my results. Noted, Robert said tightly. Then we're done here. Eleanor turned to leave, then paused at the door. One more thing. The next time you question my leadership, make sure your concerns are actually about performance and not about the fact that you're uncomfortable being led by a woman who's not in her 30s anymore. She walked out before anyone could respond. Eleanor made it to the elevator before the tears came. Not tears of sadness, tears of rage and frustration and the bone-deep exhaustion of fighting battles that should never need to be fought. She called Daniel from her car. I kept my job, she said when he answered. Barely. They put me on 6 months probation. What? After that presentation? After everything you've achieved? 7 of them voted to remove me anyway. The motion failed because it needed 8 votes. So instead, they compromised. 6 months to prove I'm still worthy of leading the company I built from nothing. Eleanor, that's insulting, degrading, exactly what I should have expected. Eleanor wiped her eyes roughly. But I still have my job. For now. So I guess that's a win. Where are you? In my car. In the parking garage. I can't go back up there right now. Come to my place, Daniel said immediately. Lily's at school. You shouldn't be alone. Eleanor almost said no. Almost drove home to her empty penthouse to process this alone the way she'd processed every other professional disappointment in her life. But she was so tired of being alone. Text me your address, she said. 30 minutes later, Eleanor pulled up to a modest house in a neighborhood where people had lawn ornaments and basketball hoops in their driveways. Daniel was waiting on the porch. He didn't say anything when she got out of the car, just pulled her into his arms and held her while she cried angry tears into his shoulder. Come inside, he said finally. I'll make you tea, and you can tell me everything. Daniel's house was nothing like Eleanor's penthouse. It was small and lived in, with dinosaur drawings on the refrigerator and shoes scattered by the door. The couch had a permanent indent from years of use, and there were water rings on the coffee table that no amount of furniture polish could remove. Eleanor loved it immediately. She sat on that worn couch while Daniel made tea in a kitchen that was clearly designed around an 8-year-old's needs. Plastic cups in the lower cabinets, a step stool by the sink, a chore chart held to the refrigerator with dinosaur magnets. Here, Daniel said, handing her a mug. It's chamomile. Supposed to be calming. I don't feel calm. I feel furious. You have every right to be furious. They basically told you that 15 years of excellence isn't enough. That you have to prove yourself all over again because they're scared of what exactly? A competent woman over 40? That's exactly what they're scared of, Eleanor said. Women my age aren't supposed to be powerful. We're supposed to step aside gracefully and make room for the next generation. Anything else is threatening. Daniel sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. What are you going to do? Survive the next 6 months. Hit every metric they're measuring. Make it impossible for them to question me again. Eleanor set down her tea and looked at him. But Daniel, this means 6 months of intense scrutiny. Every decision questioned, every stumble magnified. And I can't I can't ask you to be part of that. You're not asking. I'm volunteering. You have Lily. You have your job. You have a life that doesn't involve board meetings and probationary reviews. I also have you, Daniel said quietly. And I'm not walking away just because things got complicated. This isn't complicated. This is a disaster waiting to happen. If we're seen together, if anyone finds out we're whatever we are, it becomes ammunition against me. CEO, too distracted by personal life to focus on company. Leadership priorities questionable. I've seen it happen to other women. So we're careful, discreet. For 6 months? Daniel, that's not fair to you. It's not fair to Lily, who barely sees you as it is because you've been helping me fight this battle. Let me worry about what's fair to me and Lily. Daniel took her hand. Eleanor, I'm not some fragile thing that breaks under pressure. I'm a single father who's been managing complicated situations for 8 years. I can handle discretion. What I can't handle is walking away from you because it might be easier. Eleanor wanted to argue, wanted to protect him from the fallout that would inevitably come from being associated with her, but she was so tired of fighting alone. Okay, she said finally, but the moment this affects Lily, the moment she gets confused or hurt or caught in the middle, we stop. We take a step back and figure out what's actually sustainable. Agreed? Agreed. They sat together on Daniel's couch, drinking tea that was rapidly getting cold, while afternoon light filtered through curtains that had probably been there since before Lily was born. I should go, Eleanor said eventually. You need to pick up Lily soon. Stay for dinner, both of you. Lily's been asking to meet you. Eleanor's heart jumped. Daniel, I don't think... Just dinner, pizza, and probably a lengthy lecture about the Cretaceous period. Nothing serious. Just let her see that the person I've been helping is real, that she's not competition for my attention. What if she doesn't like me? She'll like you. She likes everyone who listens to her dinosaur facts with appropriate enthusiasm. Eleanor found herself smiling despite everything. I can do appropriate enthusiasm. Then stay. So Eleanor stayed. When Lily burst through the door at 3:30, backpack bouncing and talking before she even saw her father, Eleanor felt her anxiety spike. But then Lily spotted her on the couch and stopped mid-sentence. You're the work lady, she said with 8-year-old directness. I'm Eleanor, Eleanor said, standing up. You must be Lily. How do you know my name? Your dad talks about you constantly. I know about your dinosaur collection and your spelling test scores and how you're the fastest runner in your class. Lily looked at Daniel suspiciously. You told her about my running? I'm very proud of your running, Daniel said defensively. Lily turned back to Eleanor, assessing her with the critical eye of a child who'd learned to evaluate the people her father brought into their lives. Do you like dinosaurs? I'm still learning about them, Eleanor said honestly, but I'd love to know more. What's your favorite? Eleanor remembered Daniel mentioning Lily's current obsession. I've been reading about velociraptors recently. They're fascinating. They're overrated, Lily said with the confidence of an expert. Everyone likes velociraptors because of the movies, but they were actually really small, like chicken-sized, and they had feathers. I didn't know that. Most people don't. Do you want to see my collection? Eleanor glanced at Daniel, who was grinning. I'd love to. She spent the next hour sitting on Lily's bedroom floor, learning more about paleontology than she'd ever expected to know. Lily showed her fossils and plastic models and books with pages worn soft from repeated reading. She explained the difference between herbivores and carnivores, between the Triassic and Jurassic periods, between actual scientific accuracy and Hollywood nonsense. And Eleanor listened with genuine interest, asking questions that made Lily's face light up with the joy of sharing knowledge with someone who actually cared. When Daniel called them for pizza, Lily was in the middle of explaining why the Brachiosaurus depicted in most movies was anatomically impossible. They ate at a kitchen table that was scarred with years of homework and art projects. Lily dominated the conversation, barely pausing between bites to tell Eleanor about her upcoming field trip and her science fair project and the new exhibit at the Natural History Museum. Daddy promised we'd go this weekend, Lily said, looking at Daniel pointedly. And we will, Daniel confirmed. Saturday morning, first thing. Can Eleanor come? Lily asked. The question hung in the air. Eleanor looked at Daniel, who looked surprised and pleased and uncertain all at once. If Eleanor wants to, he said carefully, but she might be busy. Lily turned to Eleanor with those direct eyes that saw everything. Do you want to come? It's really cool. They have a whole room just for extinct marine reptiles. Eleanor thought about 6 months of probation, about board meetings and scrutinized decisions, about the careful, lonely life she'd built where everything was controlled and nothing was spontaneous. Then she looked at this 8-year-old girl who was offering her a glimpse into something real and messy and completely outside the world of quarterly earnings and investor relations. I'd like that very much, Eleanor said. Lily beamed. Good, because Daddy always forgets to read the informational plaques, and I need someone who will actually pay attention. After dinner, Eleanor helped clean up while Lily did homework at the kitchen table. It was so domestic, so normal, so completely foreign to everything Eleanor's life usually looked like. She was loading the dishwasher when Daniel came up behind her. You didn't have to say yes to the museum, he said quietly, if it's too much. I know, but I want to go. Eleanor turned to face him. Today was awful, the board meeting, the probation, all of it. But this, dinner with you and Lily, learning about dinosaurs, just being part of something normal, this is the first time all day I've felt like myself. Good, Daniel said and kissed her softly. Daddy, Eleanor, come look at this. They broke apart, both smiling, and went to see whatever Lily had discovered in her science textbook. Eleanor left at 8:30, after Lily had been tucked into bed with her triceratops, and a promise that Eleanor would definitely come to the museum on Saturday. She drove home feeling lighter than she had in months. The 6-month probation still loomed, the board's mistrust still stung, but for the first time since this whole nightmare started, Eleanor felt like maybe she wasn't fighting alone. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. Saturday morning arrived bright and cold, the kind of November day that made breath visible and hands seek pockets. Eleanor stood outside the Natural History Museum at 9:45, 15 minutes early, watching families stream through the entrance with the particular chaos that came with children and weekend outings. She'd changed clothes 3 times that morning. Too formal made her look like she was attending a business function. Too casual made her look like she was trying too hard. She'd finally settled on jeans and a soft blue sweater that Lily had complimented during dinner, reasoning that an 8-year-old's approval was probably more valuable than her own anxious deliberation. Daniel's car pulled up at 9:57. Lily was out of the back seat before the engine stopped, running toward Eleanor with the boundless energy of childhood. You came! Daddy said you might have to work, but you came! I wouldn't miss it, Eleanor said, and meant it. Daniel joined them, carrying a backpack that Eleanor suspected was full of snacks and emergency supplies. He kissed her cheek quickly, casually, the kind of greeting that could pass for friendly, but felt like more. Ready for 3 hours of educational lecturing? He asked. I've sat through board meetings that lasted 6 hours. I think I can handle Lily's tour. Board meetings don't require you to retain information about the Mesozoic era, Daniel warned. Lily grabbed Eleanor's hand with the unself-conscious trust of a child who'd decided someone was worth knowing. Come on! The marine reptile exhibit closes at 1, and we need to see it first. They spent the morning moving through halls filled with fossils and dioramas. Lily narrated everything with passionate intensity, correcting museum placards when she found errors and elaborating on facts that interested her. Eleanor listened with genuine fascination, asking questions that made Lily's face light up. Daniel hung back, watching them together with an expression that made Eleanor's chest tight. This wasn't just a museum trip. This was an audition of sorts, Lily testing whether Eleanor was someone who could fit into their lives, and Eleanor proving she could be present for something that had nothing to do with quarterly earnings or market share. In the marine reptile hall, Lily stopped in front of a massive mosasaurus skeleton suspended from the ceiling. This is my favorite, she said reverently. It was like a huge swimming lizard, 40 feet long. It could eat sharks. That's terrifying and amazing, Eleanor said. Most things in the Cretaceous period were terrifying and amazing. That's why I like it better than now. Now is kind of boring. I don't know, Eleanor said thoughtfully. Now has some pretty amazing things too, like museums where you can see creatures that lived millions of years ago, like people who know everything about dinosaurs because they care enough to learn. Lily considered this. I guess now is okay, But the Cretaceous period was better. Fair enough. They broke for lunch in the museum cafe, where Lily ordered chicken nuggets with the kind of certainty that came from knowing exactly what she wanted. Eleanor found herself relaxing into the rhythm of their dynamic. Lily's enthusiastic monologues, Daniel's gentle redirections, the easy way they navigated each other's needs. "Eleanor," Lily said around a mouthful of French fry, "do you have kids?" The question landed like a stone. Daniel looked up sharply, ready to intervene, but Eleanor shook her head slightly. "No," she said honestly. "I don't." "Why not?" "Lily, that's personal," Daniel said gently. "It's okay," Eleanor said. She looked at Lily's open, curious face and decided honesty was better than deflection. "I spent a long time building my company, working very hard, and I kept thinking I'd have time later for other things, like a family. But time moves faster than we think it will." "So you're too old now?" Lily asked with the bluntness only children could manage. "Lily," Daniel started. "I don't know if I'm too old," Eleanor said, "but I know I missed the chance I thought I'd have. That's why it's important to pay attention to the things that matter while you have them." Lily absorbed this with serious consideration. "Is that why you're dating my dad? Because you don't want to miss more chances?" Daniel looked like he wanted the floor to open and swallow him. Eleanor felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I'm spending time with your dad because he's kind and smart and makes me laugh," Eleanor said carefully. "And because being around both of you reminds me that there's more to life than work." "Do you love him?" "Lily, that's enough," Daniel said firmly. Eleanor doesn't have to answer that. But Lily was still looking at Eleanor with those direct eyes that saw everything, and Eleanor found herself answering anyway. "I care about him very much, and I care about you too. Is that okay?" Lily thought about it, taking another bite of her chicken nugget. "I guess so, as long as you don't try to change everything. Katie's mom's boyfriend wanted Katie to stop doing horse stuff because he thought it was expensive and boring. That's why Katie doesn't like him." "I would never ask you to stop loving dinosaurs," Eleanor said solemnly. "In fact, I'm learning to love them too." Lily smiled, apparently satisfied with this answer. "Okay, then you can keep dating my dad." Daniel dropped his face into his hands. "I'm so sorry," he said through his fingers. Eleanor was laughing despite herself. "Don't be. She's just being honest." They finished lunch and spent another hour in the museum before Lily started showing signs of exhaustion. The drive back to Daniel's house was quieter, Lily dozing in the back seat while Daniel and Eleanor talked in low voices. "She really grilled you," Daniel said apologetically. "She's protecting you, both of you. I respect that." Eleanor glanced back at Lily's sleeping form. "She's wonderful, Daniel. Really wonderful." "She is, and she likes you, which frankly makes you the first person she's actually approved of since the divorce. That's a lot of pressure. Only if you want it to be." Eleanor thought about that as they pulled into Daniel's driveway, about pressure and expectations, and the difference between feeling obligated and choosing to care. "I don't feel pressured," she said finally. "I feel lucky that you're letting me into this part of your life." Daniel leaned across the center console and kissed her softly. The feeling's mutual. The next 3 months became a careful dance of discretion and stolen moments. Eleanor threw herself into proving the board's concerns unfounded. She closed 2 major contracts that the company had been courting for years. She implemented new efficiency measures that cut operational costs by 18% without touching employee salaries. She gave interviews to industry publications, speaking eloquently about sustainable growth and long-term vision. The board's monthly reviews became less hostile. Robert Blackwell's questions shifted from accusatory to genuinely curious. Even Jennifer Kwan admitted grudgingly that the numbers were trending positively. But the scrutiny never disappeared entirely. Every decision Eleanor made was documented, analyzed, questioned. She felt like she was working with a microscope trained on her every move. Through it all, Daniel was there. He couldn't be there publicly. They'd agreed that keeping their relationship private was essential during the probation period, but he was there in late-night phone calls when Eleanor was drowning in stress. There in text messages that made her smile during tense meetings. There on weekends when Lily was with Rachel, stolen hours in Eleanor's penthouse or his house, talking and laughing and building something that felt increasingly real. And increasingly, Lily was there too. Museum trips became a regular Saturday occurrence. Eleanor started joining them for dinners, helping Lily with homework, attending her soccer games, and sitting in the bleachers beside Daniel while Lily ran up and down the field with fierce determination. The whispers started in February. Eleanor first heard them during a coffee break at an industry conference. Two younger executives who didn't realize she was in the bathroom stall talking about her in voices that carried. "Did you hear Whitmore's dating someone?" "No way. Who'd date her? She's like 50. 48 actually, and apparently it's some security guy. Way younger. People are saying she's going through a midlife crisis." "That's sad. Like, just accept you're past that phase of life, you know?" Eleanor had stood frozen in the stall, listening to them dissect her personal life with casual cruelty. When she finally emerged, they'd already left. She'd washed her hands with shaking fingers and returned to the conference with her professional mask firmly in place. She didn't tell Daniel about the conversation, didn't want him to feel like he was causing problems just by existing in her life. But the whispers grew louder. Someone saw them at a restaurant. Someone else saw Eleanor leaving Daniel's house early one Sunday morning. The gossip spread through the industry like wildfire, fueled by people who love to watch powerful women stumble. In March, Robert Blackwell called Eleanor into his office. "We need to talk about the rumors," he said without preamble. Eleanor's stomach dropped. "What rumors?" "Don't insult my intelligence, Eleanor. You're in a relationship with someone significantly younger. Someone who works in tech security. Someone whose firm has contracts with this company. Daniel Hayes works for Meridian Security Solutions. He's never worked directly on Whitmore Technologies' account since we started seeing each other. There's no conflict of interest." "That's not what concerns me." Robert leaned back in his chair, studying her. "What concerns me is optics. We're 3 months into your probationary period. You're supposed to be demonstrating focus and professional judgment. Instead, you're providing ammunition to anyone who wants to claim you're distracted. My personal life has zero impact on my professional performance. The numbers prove that." "The numbers are good. Excellent even. But numbers aren't everything. We need the board to have confidence in your leadership, and right now they're questioning your judgment." Eleanor felt rage building, hot and familiar. "They're questioning my judgment because I'm in a relationship? Would they question a male CEO's judgment for dating someone?" "That's not the point." "That's exactly the point, Robert. If I were a man in his 50s dating a woman in her 30s, no one would bat an eye. But because I'm a woman dating a man 5 years younger than me, suddenly my professional judgment is suspect?" "He's not 5 years younger. You're 48 and he's, 43? That's a different dynamic." "A different dynamic than what? Than acceptable? Than appropriate?" Eleanor was standing now, her voice rising. "I have led this company flawlessly for 3 months. I've exceeded every metric you've measured me against. And you're sitting here telling me that my personal relationship with a man I care about, who cares about me, is a problem? I'm telling you that perception matters. Fair or not, people are talking, and that talk affects investor confidence." "Then maybe you should tell investors to focus on earnings reports instead of my dating life." Robert sighed. "Eleanor, I'm trying to help you. The final board review is in 6 weeks. If you want to secure your position permanently, you need to eliminate distractions. Focus entirely on the company. Make the board feel confident that you're fully committed." "I am fully committed. I've been fully committed for 15 years. What you're really saying is that I should choose between my career and my personal life. Again, the same choice I've been making for decades. I'm saying that for the next 6 weeks, you should prioritize the company. After that, once your position is secure, your personal life is your own business." Eleanor looked at this man she'd worked with for a decade, seeing him clearly for the first time. He wasn't cruel. He was just complicit in a system that demanded women sacrifice everything while men sacrifice nothing. "Thank you for your advice, Robert," she said coldly. "I'll take it under consideration." She left his office before he could say anything else. That evening, Eleanor sat in her penthouse trying to process the conversation. Robert's words circled in her head like vultures. Eliminate distractions. Prove your commitment. Choose. She'd spent her entire life making that choice. Career over relationship. Success over connection. achievement over love. And it had left her sitting alone in a cafe being told she was too old for anyone to want her. Meeting Daniel had changed something fundamental. He'd shown her that she didn't have to choose, that being successful and being loved weren't mutually exclusive, that at 48, she could have both. But the board didn't see it that way. They saw her relationship as evidence of wavering focus, as a distraction from what really mattered. Eleanor's phone rang. Daniel? She almost didn't answer. Almost decided that maybe Robert was right, that maybe 6 weeks of distance would make the final review easier. But then she thought about Lily's direct questions at the museum, about Daniel holding her while she cried after the initial board meeting, about Saturday mornings learning about dinosaurs and Sunday evenings helping with homework and all the small, precious moments that made life feel like more than quarterly earnings. She answered. Hey, Daniel said. Bad time? No, just thinking. About? Eleanor told him everything. About the whispers, about Robert's advice, about the choice she was being asked to make again. Daniel was quiet for a long moment after she finished. What do you want to do? He asked finally. I don't know. Robert's not wrong about the optics. If the board thinks I'm distracted, it affects their vote. And if I lose my position after coming this close, Eleanor's voice caught, I don't know if I can survive that. Then we take a break. 6 weeks. We can do 6 weeks. Daniel, Eleanor, listen to me. Your career matters. The company you built matters. If stepping back from us for a few weeks helps secure that, then that's what we do. I'm not going anywhere. 6 weeks, 6 months, whatever you need. The offer was generous, selfless, exactly what Eleanor should want, but she was so tired of sacrificing. No, she said quietly. No? No, I'm not doing this again. I'm not choosing my career over my life. I'm not proving my commitment by eliminating everything that makes me human. Eleanor's voice strengthened. I've spent 3 months exceeding every expectation. I've proven myself 10 times over. If the board can't see that because I'm in a relationship, then the problem isn't my judgment. It's theirs. Eleanor, you worked so hard for this. Don't throw it away because what? Because I fell in love with you? The words hung in the air, huge and terrifying and true. Daniel's breath caught audibly. Eleanor, I love you, she said again, more certainly this time. I love you and I love Lily, and I love the life I'm building with both of you. And I'm not sacrificing that to make a board of directors more comfortable with my existence. What are you going to do? I'm going to show up at the final review in 6 weeks with numbers that can't be argued with. And I'm going to tell them that my personal life is exactly that, personal. And if they can't separate my professional excellence from their discomfort with who I choose to date, then maybe I don't want to work for them anyway. That's either incredibly brave or incredibly reckless. Probably both. Eleanor felt lighter than she had in weeks. But I'm done being who other people think I should be. I'm 48 years old. I've earned the right to make my own choices. I love you too, Daniel said quietly, in case that wasn't clear. Eleanor smiled through sudden tears. It's clear now. They talked for another hour, making plans for the weekend and discussing strategy for the board review. When Eleanor finally hung up, she felt different, stronger, like she'd finally stopped running from herself. The next 6 weeks were a blur of work and deliberate visibility. Eleanor didn't hide her relationship with Daniel. She didn't flaunt it either, but she stopped pretending it didn't exist. When industry colleagues asked about her personal life, she answered honestly. When gossip reached her ears, she ignored it, and she worked harder than she'd ever worked before. She closed the Morrison contract renewal. 3 years, $800 million. She launched a new product line that had been in development for 18 months, to spectacular market reception. She gave a keynote speech at a major tech conference that was quoted in 6 different publications. The numbers were undeniable. Under Eleanor's leadership, even during the scrutiny of the probationary period, Whitmore Technologies had grown by 22%. Stock prices had climbed steadily. Employee satisfaction scores had reached all-time highs. The final board review was scheduled for the last Tuesday in April. Eleanor arrived at the office at 6 a.m., dressed in the same navy suit she'd worn to the first confrontation. She'd prepared a presentation that was half the length of her previous defense, not because she had less to say, but because the data spoke for itself. Daniel had offered to wait outside the building during the meeting, moral support on standby. Eleanor had kissed him and told him to go to work, to trust that she could fight this battle herself. But knowing he was just a phone call away made all the difference. The board assembled at 9. The same 12 faces, though the expressions were different now, less hostile, more thoughtful. Robert Blackwell looked almost proud. "Eleanor," he said as she entered, "thank you for joining us. Please, sit." This time, Eleanor sat. "We've reviewed 6 months of performance data," Robert continued. "The results are extraordinary. 22% growth, major contract renewals, successful product launch. These numbers speak to exceptional leadership." Eleanor waited for the other shoe to drop. "However," Jennifer Kwan said, and there it was, "we remain concerned about the personal distractions we discussed previously. My relationship with Daniel Hayes has had zero negative impact on company performance," Eleanor said calmly. "In fact, one could argue that having a stable, supportive personal life has made me a more effective leader. But that's speculation. What's not speculation is the data. Whitmore Technologies has thrived under my leadership during this probationary period." "The relationship itself isn't the issue," Robert said carefully. "It's the optics, the gossip, the questions it raises about priorities." Eleanor took a deep breath. This was the moment, the choice she'd been building toward for 6 months. "Let me be very clear," she said, looking at each board member in turn. "I am in a relationship with Daniel Hayes. He's 43 years old, kind, intelligent, and supportive. He's also a single father who's taught me that success means nothing if you have no one to share it with. Our relationship does not interfere with my ability to lead this company. If anything, it enhances it." "Eleanor," Robert started. "I'm not finished. I've spent 6 months proving that I can exceed every expectation you've set. I've grown this company, secured major contracts, and maintained excellence under intense scrutiny. What I won't do is apologize for having a personal life. What I won't do is choose between career success and human connection. And what I definitely won't do is pretend that a 48-year-old woman dating a 43-year-old man is somehow scandalous or inappropriate." The room was completely silent. "So here's my position," Eleanor continued. "I am the best person to lead Whitmore Technologies. The data proves it. 6 months of exceptional performance proves it. 15 years of sustained growth proves it. If this board votes to remove me because I'm in a healthy relationship with someone you deem inappropriate, then that's your choice. But it's a choice you'll have to defend publicly, and I promise you the explanation won't reflect well." She stood up, gathering her materials. "I'll wait in my office for your decision, but I want to be clear. I'm not resigning. I'm not stepping aside quietly. If you want me gone, you'll have to vote me out. And you'll have to live with what that decision says about this company's values." Eleanor walked out of the boardroom with her spine straight and her head high. She made it to her office, closed the door, and collapsed into her chair with shaking hands. She'd just gambled her career on the belief that she deserved both success and love, on the radical notion that she didn't have to choose. Now she just had to wait to see if the board agreed. Her phone buzzed. "Daniel, how'd it go? I told them I'm in love with you, and if they can't handle that, they can vote me out." A pause, then, "That's either the most romantic thing anyone's ever said or the worst career decision in history." "Probably both." "Eleanor, whatever they decide, I'm proud of you. Even if I just torpedoed 15 years of work, especially then, because you chose yourself. Finally." Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes. "I should let you go. They could call any minute. I'll be here. Whatever happens, I'll be here." Eleanor sat in her office for 47 minutes, the longest 47 minutes of her life. When Patricia knocked on her door, Eleanor's heart stopped. "They're ready for you." Eleanor stood on legs that felt like water and walked back to the boardroom. The board was assembled exactly as before, but this time several members were smiling. "Eleanor, please sit," Robert said. She sat, her heart pounding. "We've taken our vote," Robert said. "The motion to remove you from your position as CEO required a 2/3 majority." Eleanor held her breath. The motion failed. 11 votes against removal, 1 abstention. "Eleanor, you've proven beyond doubt that you are the right leader for this company. Your probationary period is over. You have the board's full confidence and support." Eleanor's vision blurred. "All 11 voted against removal?" "All 11, Jennifer Kwan confirmed. She was smiling, actually smiling. Your presentation 6 months ago was compelling. Your performance since then has been extraordinary. And your comments today reminded us of something we'd forgotten. This company exists because you refused to accept limitations other people tried to impose. We were trying to impose new limitations. That was wrong. We owe you an apology, Robert added. This probationary period should never have happened. You've led this company flawlessly for 15 years. Your age, your personal life, your relationship status. None of it has any bearing on your exceptional abilities as a CEO. We lost sight of that. We won't make that mistake again. Eleanor couldn't speak, couldn't process what she was hearing. There's one more thing, Robert said. He slid a document across the table. We've prepared a new contract, 5 years, significant increase in compensation and equity, complete operational autonomy. We're not just keeping you as CEO, Eleanor. We're making sure you know how much we value what you've built. Eleanor looked at the contract through tears she didn't bother hiding. 5 years. Security. Recognition. Everything she'd fought for. Thank you, she managed. No, Robert said quietly. Thank you. For not giving up on us. For proving us wrong. For being exactly who this company needs. Eleanor signed the contract with shaking hands. When she left the boardroom this time, she was smiling. She made it to the elevator before calling Daniel. I kept my job, she said when he answered. 5-year contract, full support. They apologized, Daniel. They actually apologized. Of course they did. You're Eleanor Whitmore. You're unstoppable. I want to see you right now. Can you get away? I'm already walking to my car. Where should I meet you? Harbor Street Cafe, where it all started. Eleanor arrived first, choosing the same corner table where Marcus Chen had delivered his casual cruelty 8 months ago. The table where Daniel had walked over and changed everything. She ordered coffee and waited. Daniel arrived 10 minutes later, slightly breathless from rushing. He crossed the cafe in quick strides and pulled Eleanor out of her chair and into his arms, kissing her without caring who saw. When they finally broke apart, Eleanor was laughing and crying at the same time. I did it, she said. I kept my career and I kept you, and I didn't have to choose. You fought for both. That's different than keeping them. That's claiming them. They sat down, hands linked across the table, in the exact spot where everything had started. I've been thinking, Daniel said carefully, about the future, about what happens next. What did you have in mind? Lily asked me last week when you were going to move in with us. Eleanor's breath caught. What did you tell her? I told her that was a decision you and I would make together. But Eleanor, I want you to move in. Not because it's practical or convenient, because I wake up every morning wishing you were there, because Lily draws pictures of the 3 of us at dinner, because I love you and I want to build a life with you. I love you too, Eleanor said, and I want that life. But Daniel, we need to be realistic. You have a small house. I have a penthouse. We both have established routines, responsibilities, so we figure it out. Maybe we sell both places and buy something new, something that's ours. Or maybe you keep the penthouse for when you need quiet, and we make my place work. I don't care about the logistics, Eleanor. I care about waking up next to you. Eleanor thought about her empty penthouse, about years of choosing solitude because it seemed safer than vulnerability. Okay, she said. Okay? Okay, let's figure it out. Let's build something together. She stopped, overwhelmed by the enormity of what she was agreeing to. Let's choose each other. Daniel was grinning. There's one more thing, and you can absolutely say no, but I've been carrying this around for 2 weeks waiting for the right moment. He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket and set it on the table between them. Eleanor stared at it, her heart pounding. I know it's fast, Daniel said. I know we've only been together 8 months. I know there are 1,000 reasons to wait. But Eleanor, I've spent 3 years being careful and cautious and safe, and it got me nowhere. You taught me that sometimes the brave thing is choosing what you want instead of what makes sense. So I'm choosing you, if you'll have me. He opened the box. Inside was a simple platinum band with a single diamond that caught the cafe's light. Will you marry me? Daniel asked. Eleanor looked at this man who'd walked across a cafe to defend a stranger, who'd spent 76 hours saving her company, who'd stood beside her while she fought for her career and her dignity, who loved her not despite her age or her complications, but because of the entirety of who she was. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I'll marry you." Daniel slid the ring onto her finger with hands that shook slightly. Then he kissed her again, and the cafe erupted in spontaneous applause from strangers who'd been eavesdropping shamelessly. They were married 3 months later in Eleanor's penthouse garden, which turned out to be the perfect size for an intimate ceremony. Lily stood between them during the vows, holding both their hands, wearing a dress she'd picked out herself and dinosaur earrings because she'd insisted on staying true to herself. Patricia served as Eleanor's witness. Tom Reeves stood up for Daniel. Rachel sat in the front row and cried happy tears, genuinely delighted that her ex-husband had found someone who made him smile like that. The ceremony was simple. The vows were honest, and when the officiant pronounced them married, Lily cheered louder than anyone. They sold Daniel's house and Eleanor's penthouse and bought a place in between, not too big, not too small, with a yard for Lily and an office for Eleanor and enough room for all of them to exist together without tripping over each other. Lily's dinosaur collection expanded to fill an entire bookshelf in the living room. Eleanor's work schedule became more manageable as she learned to delegate and trust her team. Daniel continued solving security problems with the same intensity that had saved Eleanor's company, but he made it home for dinner most nights. On Saturday mornings, they went to the museum. All three of them, every week without fail. It became their tradition, their touchstone, the thing they could count on no matter how chaotic the rest of life became. Eleanor never saw Marcus Chen again. She heard through industry channels that he'd lost his funding and shut down his company within a year. She felt no satisfaction in his failure, just a distant relief that she'd never have to hear his voice telling her what she was too old for. The board never questioned her leadership again. Robert Blackwell became one of her strongest advocates. Jennifer Kwan, surprisingly, became something close to a friend. And when Eleanor announced her marriage to Daniel at a company all-hands meeting, the response was overwhelmingly positive, because it turned out that people loved a story about second chances, about choosing love over fear, about a powerful woman who refused to accept that any part of her life had an expiration date. 18 months after the wedding, on a Saturday morning at the Natural History Museum, Lily tugged on Eleanor's sleeve while Daniel was reading a placard about Triceratops migration patterns. "Eleanor," Lily whispered, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." "If you and Daddy had a baby, would you still love me the same?" Eleanor's heart stopped. She and Daniel had talked about this possibility, about whether, at 49, Eleanor wanted to try for a child of her own. They decided to leave it to chance to see what happened without the pressure of expectation, but they hadn't talked to Lily about it. "Lily, what makes you ask that?" Katie's mom had a baby with her new husband, and Katie says her mom doesn't have time for her anymore because the baby needs everything. Eleanor knelt down to Lily's eye level, taking her small hands. "If your dad and I had a baby," she said carefully, "it wouldn't change how much we love you. You're not loved because you're the only child. You're loved because you're you, because you're brilliant and kind and passionate about dinosaurs. Those things don't change based on who else is in the family. Promise?" "I promise. You'll always be important to us. Always." Lily threw her arms around Eleanor's neck, and Eleanor held her tight, this child she hadn't given birth to but loved like her own. Daniel appeared beside them. "Everything okay?" "Everything's perfect," Eleanor said, and meant it. 3 years after that cafe encounter that changed everything, Eleanor Whitmore stood in her backyard on a warm June evening, surrounded by people she loved. Daniel was manning the grill with the focused intensity he brought to everything. Lily, now 11 and as obsessed with paleontology as ever, was explaining something about pterosaur wing structures to anyone who'd listen. Eleanor's sister Sarah was there with her family. Rachel had brought her new partner, and they were all laughing about something together like the complicated modern family they'd become. Patricia had retired but still came to every gathering, bringing her famous potato salad. And in Eleanor's arms, sleeping peacefully, was 6-month-old Marcus Daniel Whitmore Hayes. They'd named him Marcus not after Marcus Chen, but in defiance of everything that man had represented. Every assumption, every limitation, every cruel declaration about what was possible. Because Eleanor had gotten pregnant at 49. Against all odds, against all expectations, against every person who'd ever told her it was too late. She'd had her baby. She'd kept her career. She'd married the man she loved. She'd built a family that looked nothing like what she'd imagined, but everything like what she needed. "You okay?" Daniel appeared beside her, sliding an arm around her waist. "I'm perfect," Eleanor said. "I'm standing in our backyard at our house with our children and our friends, and I'm perfect." "You are," Daniel agreed, kissing her temple. "You really are." Later that night, after everyone had gone home and the kids were asleep, Eleanor and Daniel sat on their porch watching fireflies dance in the summer darkness. "Do you remember that night at the cafe?" Eleanor asked. "When you walked over to my table?" "Of course, best decision I ever made. I was sitting there thinking my life was over, that I'd missed every chance that mattered, that being 48 meant being finished. And now?" Eleanor looked at her husband, at the house full of people she loved, at the life they'd built together. "Now I know that 48 was just the beginning, that love doesn't have a timeline, that it's never too late to choose yourself, to fight for what matters, to build something real." "We proved them all wrong," Daniel said. "We proved ourselves right," Eleanor corrected. "That's better." They sat together as the night deepened, two people who'd been told in different ways that they were too much or not enough, too old or too complicated, past their prime or past their chance. And they'd proven that those voices were wrong, because love hadn't passed them by. It had simply waited for the right moment, for a Wednesday evening in a cafe, for a stranger to choose courage over comfort, for two lonely people to recognize themselves in each other's eyes. It had waited for Eleanor to be exactly 48, for Daniel to be exactly 43, for Lily to be exactly 8 and needing both of them. Not too early, not too late. Exactly right. The end.